Bitcoin today. Not Bitcoin yesterday. This is Bitcoin today. Not Bitcoin today. This is Bitcoin now. Turn up those heads and let's get that education going. This is Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin now. Don't look down, but Bitcoin is on fire. This thing is, you can't kill it. You have to find something that you can trust in a trustless world, which is Bitcoin. You know, it is a asset class that protects you. Right? The U.S. federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path. The U.S. federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path. You do not sell your Bitcoin. Sell your Bitcoin. You do not sell your Bitcoin. Sell your Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin today. Bitcoin today. Bitcoin. Not Bitcoins. Not Bitcoin today. Bitcoin. Not Bitcoin today. Oh, Bitcoin today. Bitcoin today. Bitcoin today. Bitcoin today. Bitcoin today. No. It's not. It's not close. Today. Bitcoin, by the way. Bitcoin today. You do not sell your Bitcoin. Sell your Bitcoin. You do not sell your Bitcoin. Sell your Bitcoin. You do not sell your Bitcoin. Sell your Bitcoin. You do not sell your Bitcoin. Sell your Bitcoin. Don't look now, but Bitcoin is on fire. This thing is, you can't kill it. You have to find something that you can trust in a trustless world, which is Bitcoin. You know, it is a asset class that protects you. Right? The U.S. federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path. The U.S. federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path.
Don't sell your Bitcoin, everybody. Do not. Puncher, morning.
Good morning, buddy. How you doing?
Just peachy. Wonderful. Happy to be alive. Wonderful morning. Thank you.
Awesome. Do you want me to try to kick something off here?
Yeah, maybe go around the room and just say hi to the people that are up here for now, and then take it away.
All right. Say good morning to Cosmo. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good morning, guys. We're climbing that wall of worry here. I'm glad. It's funny if you look at the Google search results, nobody really cares where we're at right now, which is great news.
Yeah, no one's talking about price, which is crazy. Hey, Terrence, what's up, buddy? Hey, Terrence? What do you do in Hollywood? I know you're a Hollywood big shot, but I have no idea what you do. Can you tell us?
Yeah, so in television, I'm a showrunner, which essentially means
He's a seat filler.
exactly, yeah, I fill the seats when you do marketing. No, so I started off in film. I produced 20 feature films. I went to business school, so raised money, made my films independently, sort of, non KYC mode, but then sold them all through territories, throughout the world, all the festivals, and then would get, domestic and international distribution. So it was very just much on the business side of film. I mean, it's sort of like each film you do, you form a corporation and you become the CEO. So I had to hire the director, the cast, everybody, and I sort of immersed myself and learned a lot about story through that process. But I started to get disillusioned with just the business aspect, and I wanted to be more creative. So that's when my agents were like, you need to be in TV. And this was before the TV explosion. And we all sort of looked down on TV. And I was like, I don't know, I don't want to be at, TV. And they're like, no, the TV is the producer's medium. That's where you get to write, you get to direct, you can shoot the pilots, like you can do anything you want. You control everything. So I went into television and then did about 30 TV shows. And what I liked about that, Puncher, you'll appreciate this because I know you're an investor and a builder, is that the part that I hated about Hollywood was raising money. I wanted to create and make and tell cool stories, but I just could not stand pounding the pavement to raise money. And in television, you take a long time to come up with a cool idea and get IP and acquire books, but the network gives you the money. There's no such thing as an independent television market. You have to go through the networks. There's just no way anyone else is going to see your stuff. So I would just pitch, and I loved that. And then, reality, when I came into TV was a big thing. And I don't mean like housewives flipping tables reality. I mean more docu-follow type stuff, right? Like Duck Dynasty, which was my show for years. And so I love that kind of stuff because you just sit around and you come up with comedic things and situations where you find real businesses, you find real people, but we still script it, right? Like, I mean, we had all Arrested Development and um, uh, Arrested Development writers and stuff on Duck Dynasty. Like, it was entirely scripted, but those are real guys. They're real guys. They really hunt ducks. They really have a great, successful business. They really were like the Beverly Hills Billies. So that was just fun because that was like. You could just walk into a room and walk out with a deal and lots of money and just go somewhere and make something cool. So that's kind of what I did. I mean, it's really being a businessman, but the TV side just allowed me to be really, really creative and sort of express like my comedic and narrative side.
He's Terrence is
That's
super
awesome.
humble about all that too, Puncher. Like he's if you go like, Google or look at his IMB or whatever that page is called, or even run him through an AI, there's a lot of really cool credits to his name. And on side chats and phone calls and stuff, we've gone deep on some of the stuff, and he doesn't brag about his, rubbing shoulders and hobnobbing with the rich and famous and whatnot. He's a very humble dude, and that's just another reason I really appreciate you, Terrence.
I love that. And Terrence, it's so awesome when in a particular field you find something that's not like work and you actually enjoy doing, and you can peel back all the things you hate about it and just get in a nice niche, and then you get very good at it, and then it's just fun. It's not like work. Like I like working, I like building things, and that's like a broad message I like to tell younger people is, the key to success is finding what you're fascinated by and then doing that. And it's much easier to do it when you don't have a family and you've got all these other pressing interests. I mean, take chances when you're young and just do stuff. I mean, people underestimate um, just doing things. And when you're younger, you don't you don't play by the rules sometimes because you don't know what the rules are, and you just go out and do stuff. When you get older, you get a little more um, rigid in what you will and won't do. But that's awesome, man. I own the rights to the NBA referee scandal. I wrote a book. A lot of my friends went to prison for that, and I'll tell you a story about that one
Wait a
day.
minute. Was this related to Philadelphia?
Yeah, the gaming the game. Yeah, I own that book. I
Well,
own the.
Puncher, you're gonna laugh, and the rest of the audience doesn't need to hear this, but I'll just real quick. So, do you know Dawn Wolfram?
No,
Okay, because she sent me that book. She's like, she lives in Philadelphia, in Philly. She lives by the shore somewhere over there, and she's like,
Sean
you
Spencer
need to,
Griffin is the author. Yeah, he's
yeah. She's
amazing.
like, you need to turn this into a movie or a TV series or something. And she sent me that book. I had no idea that you have that.
Well, those guys in the book, most of them under pseudonyms, unless their names came out in the FBI documents. Tiger and Rhino, they're all buddies that I went to high school with, and back in the day, I worked with as a bookmaker. So the story is so crazy, and there's so many along with that book. But that book is the truth about what happened with that NBA referee scandal, despite what you see on Netflix with Timmy Donaghy and those knuckleheads who just basically lied about it. But a conversation for another time. Um,
Well, we can dovetail this into Bitcoin in a nice way then, because I am always looking at books and things, to turn into movies or TV shows, and I was sent Bitcoin Billionaires, with the Winklevoss twins, and I really didn't know a ton about Bitcoin, but I was curious about that. I loved the Social Network. I love Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher and their work, and I was told that this could be a sequel, that it really is the story. It is the sequel of what happened after the Winklevoss won their suit against Zuckerberg, and what they did with their money is they bought Bitcoin. And I'm like, what? Why would they go buy Bitcoin? And so I read that book, written by Ben Mesrick, and I really like a lot of his stuff. He did 21, and he did Dumb Money. If you guys saw the GameStop movie. And what just read, like, if I were to read that now as a Bitcoiner, I'd be like, okay, this is so weird. How did that orange pill me? It's just this interesting story. But It was so subtle, and just to see how the Winklevi discovered Bitcoin when they were, going down to a trip in Cyprus, and they had lost all their money, and they didn't lose all their money. They didn't have their credit cards or whatever with them, and they couldn't buy anything. And some guy at a party at some disco, and I think it was 2012 or 2013, was like, "Hey, you guys should have had Bitcoin." And they're like, "What's Bitcoin?" And they came back from that trip and smash bought 1% of the entire supply. They bought, 2.1 million Bitcoin. And then I read VJ Boyapati's article and blah blah blah. The rest is history. But I came in through story, which is why it is one thing that I'm really trying to continue to foster and push out there is orange pilling people through story.
Yeah, well, that's Bitcoin is a lot like religion, right? You're like, well, how did you come to Christ? Well, I was drunk in a bar in Tijuana and I hit rock bottom, and somebody, somebody started talking to me about sound money and blah blah blah, and then I bought my first Bitcoin. I mean, it's very similar to those kind of come to Jesus stories. But well, hey, yesterday was a very interesting day in my opinion. I
Punchy,
jumped
are we
in and
gonna
go ahead.
can I sign off on something you said too? Thanks
Yeah,
for
sure.
telling my story about being drunk in Tijuana rock bottom, but I'll
I'm
finish that
sorry.
story
I
later.
thought that was public
No,
knowledge. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's cool. No, I really appreciate what you said about marrying your passions with, what you do for work. And it's really not even like work when you actually are able to do that. And don't be discouraged because sometimes it takes a long time to figure out what that is. And don't be afraid to change careers, even if you're out seeking of like, hey, what am I supposed to be doing while I'm here on Earth? So, just try to marry your passions with what you do to be productive and get a paycheck for, or whatever that is. So, can we finish like maybe talk to PSG and Broadsword too, because they were the first dudes up here. What's up, PSG?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Um, Bitcoin's 103 this morning, and
We don't talk about the price, PSG.
my feed is flooded
Pull them off the
with
stage.
AI babies. AI babies are way more important and way more exciting and way more prevalent this morning than
Yes.
anything else that's going on. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Nobody seems to care. It's kind of exciting. Just got to tell you guys how much I appreciate you all. Feel kind of humbled to be sitting in a space talking to you guys with Puncher and Tomer's in here, Asteroids in here, TC's in here, Peg's in here. I don't know how else other than through Bitcoin we'd all be in the room together. I'd be at the table talking to you guys and everyone else in here. So just appreciate you. And I think one of Terrence's greatest accomplishments or the feather in his cap is just the fact that I've heard through the grapevine that he's actually really good friends with Lauren. So that's kind of a big deal.
That was our
We
little
all have our
secret, buddy.
crosses to bear.
You guys are doxing me hardcore today.
I just
Maybe
watched the pod that you did, Lauren, with Tomer and Eric Stacks. It was great. I highly recommend people watch that. I'll try to put it in the nest.
Wait a second, Lauren. You did a pod with Eric V. Stacks and Tomer. Is
Tomer
that a
can
true
speak to
story?
that. He's up here now. Good morning, Tomer.
Hey, good morning. I only just tuned in, so I'm not sure what I'd be speaking to, but happy
The
to speak to
pod
some.
the podcast we did together with Eric V. Stacks.
Oh, yeah, I've actually gotten a few DMs. So I don't know that it has a lot of listenership, but the people who've listened to it obviously enjoyed it because I usually get no DMs about podcasts that I appear on. But I think this one really resonated with a few people who've been listening to it so far enough that they took the effort to reach out, whether it was here on
Yeah, I'd love
Twitter
to
or on
see it.
Facebook.
Eric V.
It's
Stacks, the
really good.
coolest man in Bitcoin.
Yeah, and Tomer, I think you've been working out, or you've been doing your 100 push-ups a day. You were looking quite buff there in that video.
Well, thanks, thanks for noticing. I was trying to do 100 push-ups a day, and I don't know what happened, but I actually got to the point where I could do 100 in a single rep, like in a single set, rather, right? And 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 now I've been off of my routine for a little bit, but something happened. I don't know what. I suddenly found some strength, and I think we filmed that during the middle of that strength.
Yeah, not to be
Oh,
weird, but I was
it's
like, why does Tomer look different? What is going on? Okay, that's a really cool shirt. Okay, that's a Bitcoin bull. I think that's a Matic shirt. It's like, what's going
yeah,
on? And throughout
If
the
you
thing, I'm like,
guys,
oh, he looks muscular.
if you think creatine
yeah.
is good, steroids, people, steroids are even better.
If you're
Screw
not
You
cheating,
creatine.
you're
know,
not trying.
I was put on the creatine thing before it became popular, like about a month before. But I really didn't have a habit of taking it, and then became popular on Twitter, so I took it for another few days. But I haven't really been. It's I find it quite yucky, and it doesn't properly dissolve in anything.
Yeah,
So
you actually so there's a loading period when it comes to creatine. So there's a 2-week loading period if your dose is 5 yeah, I think it's like 5 grams or something. And then
yeah, I started with 5, and then I heard 10, and then I didn't like My habits are very flimsy.
yeah, you got to take it for like a month or two before you start really feeling the effects. I took it for about 2 years when I was really working out a year or two ago, and it makes a big difference. It really does.
Thanks,
That's
guys.
true.
Now that's gonna trend again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's get
No,
back
I was the
on
same way,
creatine and
Cosmo, but it was more like
carnivore.
10 years ago. But yeah, agreed with you, Cosmo. Go ahead, Tomer. Sorry.
No, I don't really know what else to say. I was gonna say, like, my habit, my good habit forming and my bad habit forming are always in battle with one another. And the last week and a half I've been on bad habit forming. I have an excuse, but but what can you your excuse is just that. It's only that. It's an excuse. In the meantime, I've been eating poorly and not exercising. So
Yeah, habit eats willpower for breakfast. So you
yeah,
get in the habit, and it just every day, like for the last 6 months, I've been waking up 5:30, go to the gym, stretch, workout, and it's part of your routine. And if you miss it for a few days, or you start
yeah.
wolfing down pizzas, you can go in a really bad direction. You just gotta.
Punchy, are you trying
What
to
it,
get your sexy back for me for when we meet up in Vegas, buddy?
Oh,
I
dude,
know you are.
I'm gonna be shredded. You're gonna call me diesel.
Love it.
Nah, dude, I'm just trying to get
Are you
back.
guys doing the Thunder Down Under special guest?
Yeah, I'm gonna audition. He's already in.
I'm Irish, dude. There's no thunder down under. All right. Hey, listen, I wanted to talk real quick. I usually try to grab a good guest, but just the fiat world has had me crazy busy. 6 months ago, um, I had suggested to Joe C that like all these numbers are bullshit. They're all made up. Durable goods, retail sales, inflation, GDP, CPI, PPI, PMI, the deficit, unemployment, U1, U2, U4. And then they all get revised either up or down 6 months later, not like a little bit, like to the point where, oh, they just lied to us. And then they're all put into some algorithmic trade based on all that bullshit, and that moves the markets. And yesterday seemed like a crazy day on spaces. There were a bunch of different spaces. I think the Wolf guys had one that was excellent, and Joe Carl Sally had one last night where he had some TradFi guys on, and essentially Darkside was on fire yesterday. Man, he was like, "Yeah, they're all bullshit," and he went on an epic rant yesterday that I wish I knew how to cut and.
We know a guy. So
Yeah, send me the space and the timestamp. I'll get it for you.
I think Puncher was talking about the fiat world being so much for him, and suddenly he just dropped
Yeah, we
into
lost him.
oblivion there.
He
Punch
fell into
bowl
the op return, I think.
or the punch bowl. Yeah, somebody
All right.
spiked.
Well, then I'll jump in here with a
Rod,
question
sorry. Yeah, we
then.
were gonna say good morning to you as well, and
All
Puncher
good,
just
all good.
Yeah,
okay.
wide
Go ahead.
weapon. Hello.
All right. So this is at Cosmo, but I'll open to everyone. I did say I'll bring this up in a space. You said you want to change Sats to Bitcoin, and I want to know your reasoning for why.
Oh, well, so I mentioned that yesterday in one of the spaces. We were just talking about
Isn't
you
that a
know,
BIP, Cosmo?
yeah, it's a BIP. I forgot his name. He came on the space a
TradFi
month or
because
so ago.
so,
Oh,
you got me.
Punchy
Have you
bowl
been
is
talking
in
this
the
whole time,
fourth
Puncher?
dimension of his own world. We
yeah,
lost you
Puncher.
about
Oh
3 minutes
my God,
and
what I was saying
37
was so
seconds ago.
great, and all right, never mind.
We lost you when you said dark side, and then you
And then
left.
you
So we missed the whole
literally
thing.
I'm
went
sorry.
to the dark
Dark
side.
Side went on an epic rant basically, and just yelled to everybody yesterday. the emperor has no clothes. And I believe, even on the earlier show, like I forget, Dr. Danish or whatever, his show, I think everybody's saying like, oh, these numbers are all bullshit. Everybody's coming to the realization that all of these numbers and all this nonsense, and if you look up on,
Except Josie.
except Joe, but on the government website, here's what the government website says about financial data that they put out to the public. Our goal is to provide the legal and social framework, maintaining competition, yeah, right, providing public goods and services, and redistributing income. That's their mandate, or so they think. And that's why they put out all these bullshit numbers. And the idea that we would pay any attention to these numbers anymore is just ludicrous, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, for sure. To answer Broadsword's question, he was saying earlier, yeah, there's a BIP out there right now that has to do with just changing the size of like what we would consider a Bitcoin, whether it's 100 million Sats and I think Carvalho is the one who introduced that BIP. I'm not
Not
particular.
changing the size. It's a unit bias
Right. Yeah. No, that's what I'm
fix.
saying. Yeah, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
just it's
Yeah.
relabeling is what it is.
Yeah.
They want to get rid of
exactly.
calling the smallest unit satoshis, and they
Right.
want to call the smallest unit bitcoins.
Right.
So
Yeah.
instead of 100 million satoshis to a bitcoin, there's essentially just the 100 million bitcoins times 21 million, which is 2.1 quadrillion bitcoins.
Right. And we've talked about
And
this in
yeah,
a space, but yeah, we've talked about this in a space before. And I think the problem that you have is you solve the unit bias issue, but then you come
no, you
into
don't.
well, let me just finish, please.
I want to rename yards to miles, and that way I can run
What are
one
we
second
doing,
longer.
man? This is like rehashing things from like 7 or 8 years ago.
Well,
This is
hold on,
ludicrous.
because I
Yeah,
got
go
something to
ahead.
say about it, but I want
Yeah,
to hear what
please.
Cosmo
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
was going
yeah,
towards.
so I get the point is that it was always in the cards. Satoshi thought it was in the cards too. He wrote about it, right? I don't think it's a great idea. Like, just so you guys know, I'm not like a huge proponent of it because I think that you run into issues with Bitcoin messaging in terms of, the 21 million meme that I think is really strong is then gone, and instead it's 2.1 quadrillion, which I think is a less effective, I guess, communication tool. And it's kind of purposeless. I do agree that the Satoshi brand is not great, that the Bitcoin brand is better, but it doesn't make any significant changes to anything other than you solve, or you appear to solve that.
Feels like a sales and marketing meeting here. Cosmo,
Well,
are you wrapping it? Because I'd like to hear what
yeah, okay,
TC
go ahead,
says, because I
TC.
don't want to spend a whole ton of time on this.
So this is the never-ending unit bias discussion, essentially, and this is something that has come up every single cycle that I've been a part of. Last cycle, there was a ton of people who said Sat's the standard. If just the exchanges would just stop listing the amounts of Bitcoin at 0.00 blah 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 and just put the number of satoshis there, then people will be more drawn to Bitcoin because nobody wants to buy a fraction of a Bitcoin and people can't afford whole Bitcoins. And that's one of the reasons they go to the shit coins. Oh, because I can spend a couple bucks and get thousands of Solanas or whatever, right? So that unit bias is like the thing people are trying to solve for. And so essentially there's just iteration after iteration. This latest one by John Carvalho, by the way, I think we should just start calling them Carvalhos. I think that'd be cool. Basically, he's asserting that we should just call the smallest unit bitcoins, and then that would kind of make it really approachable to people who say, oh wow, I could get 980 bitcoins for $1, and then they would be really excited to get into Bitcoin. This is absurd, and essentially the thing that's brought up again and again by a lot of people that are proponents of this is they say, oh, the calling them satoshis is awkward, and why are we calling the guy who created this system, why are we calling the smallest unit named after him? And actually, I'm looking for the thread I posted about 6 months ago. I'll share it in the nest momentarily. But basically, I was frustrated by this, and I did a quick search. How many units of measurement are named after the people that founded them or discovered them? And it's just vast. And there's just so many units that we take for granted in our world today that are named after the founder. So there's nothing awkward about it. There's long, long history for hundreds of years of this. It's not like it's without precedent. And just because some people feel a little weird about it, it's I totally reject the idea that we need to get rid of calling the smallest unit satoshis or sats. I think it works. I think there's a minority of people who are sort of uncomfortable about that. Most people out there in the world are just uncomfortable about Bitcoin as a whole. So this is not going to make or break, or be the catalyst that causes a flood of adoption or not. It's just kind of like a little bit ridiculous tinkering with something that doesn't need to be messed with. And I totally agree with Cosmo. 21 million is an epic meme. It's one of the best memes in Bitcoin. In fact, I use the number 21 in the logo of my product that I develop because of that. And I'm not about to change it to 2.1Q. Last thing I'll say, quadrillion? What? Nobody knows what a trillion is. The law of big numbers says human beings can't even wrap their heads around these things. So forget about it.
Yeah,
Enough
for
said.
sure. And that's why I like to give a little credence to some of these other, kind of steelman arguments. And so I get the Bitcoin branding is better than the Satoshi branding at the current time. But I think that the most powerful kind of meme that we do have in Bitcoin is that 21 million, and you just be breaking it in half. I don't think it's a good idea.
Lauren just DM'd me and said, "Hey, I'm going to start referring to little Lauren in feet rather than inches. What do you think of that?"
I also bought some of those little tiny hands from Temu, so I can, when I actually send photos, I have a comparison model.
By the way, so like we love Bitcoin so much, and I totally agree with what TC said. It's like, Sats work, Bitcoin works. It is true though, when you first come into Bitcoin, it's like, why is it Sats? And maybe a lot of people haven't paid attention to monetary history and how things were named as much as TC has, and it is confusing. It's like, wait, why
Do you
aren't they
guys
called
know where the
bits?
word dollar comes from?
It's a Dutch term
Thaler.
for
It was a man.
faller. That's right.
Thaler. It was a person. That dollar, the word dollar, comes from a person's name.
Which is
Nobody
why
seems to
sats
know
should
that, but
become bats, because
well,
faller became dollar. So I'm gonna have a bip here so we can have bats.
Trumpf became
Well,
Trump.
I'm glad, Cosmo, that you're on the right side of this. That's the only reason I brought it up, because I thought you were on the other side.
Thanks, Broadsword, for just derailing this conversation for the last 10 minutes. I kid. It's
I
fine.
thought I was getting it on point of actually Bitcoin, but
Yeah,
whatever.
that's true, huh? You swung us back from
But
Hollywood
it's true.
earlier.
People don't understand market cap, so they will always have a bias. But yeah, they've got to figure it out and they've got to do the work. So
You think you guys are confused? I wanted a 6 minute soliloquy and no one heard it.
It was about 3 minutes and maybe 37 seconds, so don't feel quite so bad.
So unsatisfied.
To that point,
Dark
Puncher.
side, what's up, buddy?
Oh yeah, he's up
Oh yeah,
here.
Cosmo, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, Darkseid had an epic rant on the Wolf Space last night. We'll have to find that one and clip it because you were on
Yeah,
fire
that's what
yesterday, dude.
it was. I called that, but what you guys didn't hear in my rant this morning, I called that "The Emperor Has No Clothes" rant by Darkseid. All the numbers are bullshit. It's all a construct. Go ahead, Dark.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing?
Hey, Dark. Not too shabby. How about
Well,
you?
Hey,
yeah,
brother.
I completed my 15-hour drive from Montana to Las Vegas yesterday, and I'm going to take today. I'm going to spend it with my family, with my wife, with my kids, and enjoy some of the blessings Bitcoin has brought to me. So I just wanted to stop in and wish everybody a wonderful weekend, and that's it, man. Everybody, try to spend some time with family. Try to touch grass.
if you want to spend time with family, Dark, why don't you bring them into the space? They need to be here to be where you are.
I have a feeling Dark's wife spends enough time in spaces inadvertently. It's like breathing secondhand smoke for the spouse of a smoker that smokes inside. Am I right, Dark Side?
You're close, but my wife goes by light side.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, she doesn't do the dark side thing. Now look what.
I thank God for all the blessings.
Nice. There you
Yeah,
go. See? And I'm
there,
right. She
there,
just validated my point.
there's light side. Yeah, so absolutely gonna have a wonderful day. Heading over to my son's and gonna see family, and yeah, just super excited to be here.
Dark, before you roll out, You were on fire yesterday, my man. I was following you through various spaces, just listening in, and you were like just ripping. You were like, tear it all down. It's all bullshit. It's all lies. It was so great.
Yeah, that was, yeah. I was a little upset about all the crap I was hearing on the TradFi spaces, but I'm going to keep it completely positive today, and yeah, just enjoy the blessings that Bitcoin's brought to me and my family.
So, dark side, I haven't paid much attention to Joe in a while. Is he still? What is Joe?
You see that you're trying so hard to bring me down, man. Like, just bring
We're
me
trying
right.
hard to bring Joe up because he's right underneath listening, but he just, no matter how much we poke that bear, he just refuses to get up on our stage anymore.
Yeah, no, look, Joe's a wonderful human being. I obviously I disagree with him on almost everything, but I wish him and his family all the best, and may everybody have just a wonderful weekend. Not taking
Yeah,
the
well
bait,
said,
not
man.
taking the bait today, brother.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, Joe, I seriously, nothing personal against you whatsoever. I would say anything to your face that I say on here. I know a lot of people DM you and be like, hey, get in here. They're talking shit about you. But just because we disagree doesn't mean that there's anything personal involved or anything. I would still hang and everything. So, Joe, don't take any of this stuff personally. Just disagreements. That is all. And I leave it at that.
I thought Joe did a great job last night. He had a space, and he had two TradFi, I guess CFAs or something like that on there, and it was crazy. I mean, these guys were saying you're in a cult, you're all in a cult, and you need to diversify, and Bitcoin isn't money. And then Magoo was on there, just being inappropriate. It was actually pretty funny, but. These guys, honestly, when they ask you the question, when are you going to sell your Bitcoin? And if you say, well, I don't intend to sell my Bitcoin, or I may leverage my Bitcoin, it's collateral. They're like, see, you're the same as us. You're in a cult. You're in a cult. You're never going to sell no matter what the facts are. So it was pretty interesting. But these guys are blind, and I mean blind as a bat to Bitcoin.
That whole thing was an absolute shit show, and I cannot commend TC and Joe enough for the patience they showed in there. And that's why I started this morning by saying how much I love and appreciate all of you guys. I was absolutely blown away at how little they know and how vehemently they defended their ignorance. It was unreal.
Yeah, I made an attempt to to talk to those guys. It was something I kind of regretted afterwards. They're determined to not understand it. It's just one of these things. I mean, human beings do this. This is something in psychologically to understand about why the adoption of Bitcoin is the way it is. Is there's so much credentialism in our culture. People really do lean on trusted concepts, trusted people, and you bring something novel in. You bring something truly novel and truly foreign in, and people have every reason to defend against it and reject it just outright. And it was kind of crazy. Magoo got that guy to basically like reveal his just absolutely circular logic, where he basically was talking out of both sides of his mouth. And anything good about Bitcoin, he was saying everything does that. And anything sort of generally, I don't know. It's just the whole way of communicating about it is a determined attempt to reinforce that it's nothing, and it's too risky, and that it's some kind of scam. And it's funny because it's like when I got into Bitcoin, like around 2017, like that was the narrative. And it's just one of those things like, yeah, 2017 wants its narrative back. Like you guys haven't evolved the concept any further. And it's funny too, because the kinds of things that are happening in the last year or two, ETFs and now strategic reserves and all these different developments, are the kinds of things that you would think might cause someone to, just second guess these kinds of points of view. You're even hearing central banks talking about what was it, the Bank for International Settlements? Did you guys hear about this? Like I saw this on my feed today, where the Bank for International Settlements is saying Bitcoin has properties of, protecting against weak currencies. And it's like, who needs to say it before, people just even say, well, maybe I should just take one more look, or maybe I should talk to somebody. I don't know. I would say that the determination to not find out more and to avoid learning about it is just as much a cult as whatever they think that Bitcoiners is a cult as.
So I
So
was at an event last night, and it just reminds me of how sheepy people are. I mean, up and down the hierarchy of IQ and really social status and everything. So I'm at this event, and I was talking with this woman, and she's pursuing an MBA from one of our elite universities. And she is kind of dipping her toes into Bitcoin, and she had socialized it in her cohort and had even tried to like pull some folks into this. This is basically a Bitcoin event, and none in her cohort like see any appeal to it. Now, this is supposedly, our future leaders, our best and our brightest, and they're not connecting the dots. And I got to talking with this woman, and she, in terms of credentialism, I would just, kind of just reiterate that that's exactly. And so she was telling me everybody's got like the same ideas you have when you're like 10 years old. She's like, oh well, Satya Nadella, the CEO, like, well, just that he got an MBA, and then so just like these traditional paths to like really, just to be so contrarian and see this, kind of different system, like how few amongst us are able to like really do that.
Well, Greg, these like dogmatic tropes, there's psychology behind it. I'm reminded of the kind of the experiments where they give the guy a dial and there's somebody behind a wall and they say, well, turn up the dial to like number 2. And you hear the guy in the back go, ah, he's screaming, stop, please stop electrocuting me. But because the person telling them to do it has a lab coat on and a clipboard, they continue to do it to the point of like turning the dial to like ultimate death and the person screaming and they still do it. Or the one where everybody walks into like a doctor's office and a bell rings and they all stand up and the person not in on the in on the scheme like starts to stand up with everybody else, and then everybody's standing up every time the bell rings. Nobody knows why. They're doing it because everybody else is doing it. There's a lot of that in our, I guess, our DNA, and it's a survival mechanism of sorts, right? Go with the herd. It's very difficult to break.
PSG, just chime in, man. I know your hand's up.
Yeah, just further to that space, I think to what TC was saying, you have to try to make an assessment whether people are speaking in good faith or not. And last night, that rung out so true to me is that there was no good faith there. It was willing to completely contradict one side of the argument that had just been made 20 seconds prior in order to now try to weasel out of a new place in the argument. It became very clear very quickly that there was no pursuit of truth and there was no intellectual curiosity whatsoever. It was just defending a position that was indefensible, to the point where at one point it was like, well, Bitcoin's not money and you're an idiot if you think Bitcoin is money. They use the word idiot if you owned MicroStrategy shares or if you believe that Bitcoin was money. You're an absolute, remedial noob with an 80 IQ. And the guy says something like, well, I can't go to McDonald's and buy a Big Mac with my Bitcoin. I'm like, well, you're not going to do that with euros either, or Argentinian pesos. Um,
By the way, you can actually, you can.
yeah, that's just it, and so then when that point was debunked, and TC, with great patience, and Joe too, with the great patience those guys had, tried to like bring it back around, but it became so clear that there was no good faith. It was about winning the argument. The idea that Arizona, as a state, owns like 47,000 MicroStrategy shares, just as a one-off example, and you've got these people vehemently screaming that you're an idiot and you're stupid. These are the words that they're using to describe people that are involved in the space. It's just like, it makes me appreciate this group, but it also makes me remember that the intellectual horsepower in this space and the people that are here it's uncommon. There's actually like a total yin to that yang.
We got Jakes and then Tomer.
Jakes, are you available? Your hands up.
Jakes needs to wakes. Maybe
My apologies. My
there
apologies.
it
It's
is.
it's, it's Jay. GM guys, thank you for bringing me up. Just have a quick question. What do you guys think about the new MST weekly dividends coming out through the strategy family?
Is that the one that's half MSTX and half an MSTY play?
Correct, and it's based off the volatility of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar. I don't think that they've issued a dividend yet, have they?
Not yet. It just came out, I think, last week. I think they said it takes 10 business days before they roll out the first dividend.
Yeah, I don't think I can speak on it. Anybody else here?
That would probably be a dark side.
Yeah, maybe that one's kind of just like a wait
Big
and see thing, but
dark side's living his best life, Jax. But maybe next time. Tomer, what do you got, buddy?
Okay, hey, I'm just checking if you can hear me because I had some connection problems.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. I just going back to the conversation before the last question, and in the face last night, I spent a little bit of time where we were talking about the psychology of people inside of Bitcoin, and I guess you talking about is that like there's various psychological phenomenon that happen that make it particularly hard at certain points in time to talk to certain people. And I think what you were describing is once you get a mob mentality going, there's no point in trying to discuss what's right and what's wrong. There's what the mob is saying, and they're ready to kill anyone who's speaking, you know, in contradiction to the mob. So once you're caught up in a mob mentality or a groupthink mentality, that's not the place to try to reason with somebody because there's so much pressure and insecurity. It's like the experiments that uh, Hunter was citing. If everyone's standing up because they hear a bell ring, because everyone stands up when they hear a bell ring, and you dare to say we shouldn't, why are we standing up? We shouldn't stand up. You're going to rock the boat to the point where you might get beaten up or verbally abused, as the case may be here. So you just need to know which battles to pick and when to pick them and how to pick them. Like if you're trying to talk to somebody who's really held, committed to a point of view, you have to probe and ask them a lot of why questions, and then you can find an opening. But if you're dealing with a mob, there's no point really in trying to reason with them, and you're not gonna win an argument because you're just gonna be called stupid and you know
Yeah,
quartered. So that's
yeah.
all I've
Well,
got to say about this.
Joe is doing a good job trying to depose the guy, like in a very logical way. But when you have Magoo as your co-host, who keeps muting people and then insulting people, it makes it difficult. So
Yeah,
things
I
got
mean
a little bit unwieldy. I
yeah,
think.
you can treat like you realize you're not in a rational debate. You're maybe in some kind of debate of hurling insults or this that, but you're not actually winning over anybody rationally who's going to be committed. You might get a couple of good insults in, and people on the other side might laugh and say, "Oh, he got a good insult," but they're not going to run out and buy Bitcoin because Magoo gave a good insult to some guy who was a skeptic of Bitcoin. So
I don't know. I
you,
smashed
you
by it
just
after he did that.
well, but I think you're already convicted, TC, if that's who's speaking by voice. So anyhow, there's not much you can do in every circumstance. You don't have to win. The other thing is you don't have to win every argument in life, and you're trying to help these people, and if they don't want to be helped, that's their loss, right? Not yours.
Well, last night was 100 on the entertainment value and probably 0 on the utility value, but it was enjoyable nonetheless.
Yeah, I think.
I
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, TC.
Sorry. Just real quick, the point I was trying to make when I jumped in there, and again, I did kind of regret it afterwards because of exactly what you were saying, Tomer. It's like you can't actually have a meaningful conversation with everyone, and if somebody's closed-minded about it, good luck. But it is an important point, and it is one that I do recommend bringing to people who are firmly in a tradfi point of view. If they indicate that they're interested in finding out more, it is the one thing. The FUD that Bitcoin has no use case and is basically just a gambling token. That has really been the thing that a lot of people have settled on. And I like introducing the idea to people that there's actually some really clear fundamental things that Bitcoin does that are at the root of its value. Because I think anyone who is actually intellectually honest would be able to see that this thing isn't $100,000 a coin for nothing. It's because of its permissionless. It's because of its property ownership attributes. It's because of its verifiable scarceness and open permissionless nature all around. Just look at the world today, and again, that's why I think it's such a powerful point. Is that if you look at the world dynamics as far as geopolitics, as far as the monetary shifts that are occurring, and just some of the recent events that have happened. And I think the Russia's bonds getting frozen by the Treasury just a few years ago is a perfect example where you see that we're in a world where there's more and more capital controls, there's more and more friction, there's more and more people running into situations where it's just not so straightforward to access money that you think is yours in the bank. And because of these reasons, there's real utility and real value in Bitcoin. It's not just this empty token. And that's a point that I expect someone who's intellectually honest to actually have some kind of a real response to. And that's the thing that you can clearly, when you hear them disregard that, and that was the funny thing, is that that one guy was basically saying, hey, I just took $20,000 out of the bank yesterday in cash. And it's just, that person is determined to remain in a sort of tone deaf, blinders on point of view. It's great that you're so privileged that you can do that, but if you're not even aware that other people in the world are actually challenged with that exact thing, then that's someone you're not going to get very far with.
And I think
TC,
all we really want is just the ability to like question those systems and those institutions, right? The example that Puncher gave with the standing up thing, the one that I heard was the monkeys in the room with the ladder, right? On top of the ladder is a banana, and when the monkeys would climb up, they'd all get sprayed, right? And you take one out and put a new one in. If the new monkey tried to climb the ladder, all the other monkeys would pull them down, right? And you keep replacing them one after another. Soon they're all pulling each other down and they don't know why, right? And we're not monkeys. So all we want is the opportunity to say, hey, why aren't we climbing the ladder to get the banana? And if we can have that conversation where like, oh, if we do that, then, there are some serious consequences, because I do think there are institutions and traditions that we have in our culture that are important for cohesion. But if we can't even say, hey, why aren't climbing this ladder, then you run into some serious problems, right? So I feel like, TC, to your point, it's like, hey, let's have this conversation and let's be honest with each other, right? And not like call each other idiots or morons for asking a simple question that is a reasonable question to ask.
so hi guys. When I can add on this, I did not hear the conversation with Joe, and if it was the derailing, if the current system is already insolvent or not. I mean, again, from a normal perspective, and I'm probably a little bit dumb, or at least a lot dumber than a lot of you, the numbers to me are kind of ridiculous. And when Joe would say, no, they aren't and stuff, I mean, when we even then believe that is human population actually declining, or is it just in the so-called economic states, or right? I mean, when that's also real true, then the whole system does not make sense. And even if he cannot accept that, I mean, when you once in Bitcoin, you do not get the message or whatever. You can actually, with one click, exit the system again. What we see, that's not possible in the current system, at least to my understanding. So that's probably where he should acknowledge that if you understand self custody, 100,000 per Bitcoin is totally fair. And also when he comes then with like having then his mental breakdown or calls Satoshi Bitcoins or whatever, god damn it, one Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. I just went to Kraken today. For $1, I get 1,000 Satoshis. So when I go to a conference, I probably know 15,000 Satoshis is 15 bucks, I guess so. So I probably don't want to spend 30,000 Satoshis on a burger. Ridiculous conversation.
Hey, I noticed we got Thomas up here. Hey, Thomas, you want to chime in on anything that you've heard so far?
I just came out of a meeting and jumped on. I don't. What are you guys talking about other than the usual stuff?
Yeah, go ahead, Puncher.
Well, we were just talking about a lot of spaces. I think you were on some of them yesterday, where just Dark Side was just ripping how just the lies of GDP, CPI, PPI, all the various unemployment numbers. I mean, reached a level of absurdity. And then they're all algorithmically traded as if they're fact, and then 6 months later they're revised down by a million, and it's just nonsense. It's a big construct of bullshit, and it seemed like yesterday, Dark Side and a lot of others were just yelling into the the blackness. The emperor has no clothes, and seemed to resonate
Yeah,
with a lot of people yesterday.
I never trusted the. I know that there's I'll call it a bureaucratic process to calculate the numbers, and they're doing it. They are politicized to an extent. I mean, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that, but I would also add that to a large extent, I'm not sure that um, we're measuring the right things. And so, as an example, the media, especially the financial media, I'll call it like CNBC as an issue. They like to do if that then this, and we live in a multivariate, highly complex macro world. And it's not when one thing changes, then something else happens. There's so many variables that go into it. So when we say, well, CPI was up, therefore gold went up, or interest rates, the long bond went this way and the stock market went that way. So the financial media contributes to this financial illiteracy by trying to have fortune cookie headlines on the interpretation of highly complex data that is at a minimum, uh, I want to say somewhat corrupted, but it's probably not 100% accurate. But I just think it contributes to this financial illiteracy where we don't really know what's going to happen. Like a lot of people like were talking on one of the spaces yesterday about how Bitcoin is a risk asset, and it correlates very quickly with the stock market, with the Qs and the S&P 500. And yes, it has aspects of that, but it also we know that there's also aspects of it being a safety asset. If you are concerned, depending on what jurisdiction you live in, if you're concerned about the value of the fiat that you have, Bitcoin is a great store of value proxy and superior to gold in many ways for its portability, divisibility, and transportability, and your ability to secure it at scale. So it has a lot of different properties, and to say it's one thing versus another, I think, is too simple, and we do live in a complex world. So at some level, I tune out a little bit when all these macro numbers come out, because you got to zoom out and say what's really going on with our society. And you know, I would say we're spending too much money and not producing enough. So forget what the numbers say. That is going to come home to roost, and we're going to have to pay for that at some point.
I think it's deeper than that. I think our kids are going to look back and say, "What do you mean a handful of people controlled the cost of money? And what do you mean you guys let a bunch of bankers print money with no work behind it? It's insane. That's preposterous. The whole system is bullshit. The idea that a handful of bankers print money and determine the cost of what Lauren and I are going to lend money to each other at. It's
Well, on top of
insanity.
that, the media
And
is a cohort to that. The media is complicit in all of that. You know, you mentioned the financial media. Why is it that when these all important metrics about the status of the economy that everyone's basing their decisions off of are revised in such a drastic manner, why doesn't that get amplified as loud as the initial announcement? And that's the thing again where you can just clearly see this pattern of look over here, don't look over there. The media is basically, one hand of the same central banker system that is actually, well, let's manipulate this number because it's actually more important that people think X, Y, or Z instead of telling them the truth.
That's because they're not there to actually disseminate information. They're there to create a narrative that acts as a guardrail for society so that people all kind of march in the way that they want them to.
Yeah. And by the
The
way,
banking industry has supported the growth of modern society and performed a function. It's just, it seems that certainly in the last 50 years, it's become exploitive in nature. It exploits the system, and uh, and you and so if you wanted to start a business and you needed money, the banking system was the way you would do that. If you had to do that without the banking system, it'd be highly inefficient and it would impede growth. But so now just put yourself in 2025. A lot of the old banking structures where they did perform a service for society has turned exploitive in nature, where I would almost go so far as to say there's a parasitic element to some of the financial services. Things like 30% APRs on credit cards. That seems predatory and parasitic to me on society. If I had the ability to do that, uh, I would stop that from happening. Now, people will say, well, then people aren't going to get credit if you do that because they're not credit worthy. And then I say, that's probably right. They probably shouldn't get credit if the interest rate that they have to have is 30%. I just don't think that's right. And
See,
so,
that's all risk
hey, Thomas,
assessment. Risk
Tom,
got completely manipulated when the guardrails of a gold basis to the money was taken away, and so it's completely
TC,
warped.
that's the exact thing. All of these are symptoms. You're describing symptoms that come about from the disease of removing proof of work in one form or another from the creation of money. When you separate money from the need, the absolute necessity of backing it with work, whether it's in the form of gold or Bitcoin or actual work or energy. When you do that, the system gets completely perverted and human nature takes over and all these pathologies inevitably enter the system and the system breaks.
and again, I'll lament one more thing, and I don't think I'm ever going to get over how the 2008 financial crisis went down. And so I will say that, yeah, modern banking performs an essential service for modern society, but it has become um, exploitive and parasitic in a large extent. But what we had in 2008 is we allowed for there to be privatized gains and socialized losses. And so that to me sucks. I don't like that, and I'm not gonna ever get over it. And I, I just don't. I fucking don't like it.
Yeah, Thomas. It's also bad that the winners and losers in that scenario were actually hand selected by a few people. So that even makes it worse. I mean, this conversation we could go deep on, you know, who's right and who's wrong on how much manipulation is going on with these numbers, blah 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 blah. But to me, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, it's hard for me to believe that anyone believes 100% hook, line, and sinker the numbers were being fed. I think there's definitely manipulation in there. And then just doubling down on what other speakers have said, including TC, the media is out with a narrative, and unfortunately, we discussed the levers and the manipulation behind the scenes of various things. Unfortunately, the narrative is the biggest and baddest of all of these levers. And so when you can do things like you guys were describing with all these different psychology experiments, where you're saying, the sheep and the monkey and the whatever else. It's like, hey, all we have to do is control the narrative and get these people flowing in this direction, and we can control the whole populace. And division is a huge one as well. When we can divide people with whatever it is, eye color, politics, religion, you name it, then we can't agree on things. And that even goes back to, the discussions Joe was having last night, talking about people trying to shame other people into saying, like, no, you're an idiot because, it's that might have been a better argument, you know, 8 years ago, when less and less of the collective will of people were agreeing on that. And that's basically what we're seeing when we see price go up and adoption and all these things, and governments and other entities agreeing that yes, Bitcoin is a unit of value. We will opt our value out of this current value keeping system because it is becoming more and more corrupted every day, and it's becoming more and more elastic. We're going to opt our value into this other system. So it's like these arguments are null and void, in my opinion, because it's just like saying, like, you're arguing against a movement here, a whole bunch of people, companies, governments, etc., and they're deciding in real time, and it's happening, and the evidence is right in front of our face. So to me, like, I don't even want to engage in these ridiculous arguments, because I just see it for what it is. And I hope these kinds of discussions encourage people, instead of being sheep, instead of just following, instead of reading that headline in a effed up newspaper or television, get your ass off the couch and do your own research and figure it out for yourself and be your own person. You have your own free will, your own free mind. Use it.
So Joe blocked me, and I'm a friend of Larry Lepard. So going back to 2008, that was the scene of the crime, right? That was where I was certainly radicalized. And but prior to that, there was the idea, I would say, going back to Reagan and his budget advisor, David Stockman, of this kind of city on a hill, country on a hill, whatever, that you've got in like all those free market principles, and the way that those were violated in '08 sort of like kind of made you like not see the world the same way. And so for those of us of a certain ideological bent, it seems like this thing is inevitable, and when you're taking this sort of longer view of things, that that it really is like the Ponzi that we've constructed is it going to collapse? And that's, I suppose, where Joe and I get into our fighting. He says it's not going to collapse tomorrow, and the Bitcoin Tina got shaken out at 16K because of the doom and the gloom. Maybe it's right. So maybe we do go another. We're 35 trillion. Maybe we go to 70. Maybe we go to 100. Like, is there no limit? Because our money, it's shit's still kind of working, right? You go out and like it's not chaos in the streets. But I will say, hey, Joe blocked me because I put up a favorable tweet about Lepard's book, and Joe got into my DMs and sent me a note saying Lepard's an idiot.
Hey, let's do the same thing that the core developers do on the GitHub, and let's talk about ideas and not people, shall we? Hmm?
No, let's talk about Joe. Honestly, a lot of the time, for Joe, I just try to poke him to get him up here. I was trying to get under his skin. It's not working. So, Joe, nothing personal, honestly, buddy. I don't see eye to eye with you on a lot of things, and I don't know who the hell's paying you, but anyway, no, I'll I'll stop talking about people. That
No,
was
no.
kind of
Look, just
half humor, and
last
yeah, go
thing.
ahead.
The clear thing is that you have these moments in time that you should not forget. And I think in the financial crisis in '08, we saw things happen that should leave a mark with you. And the bare minimum is pay attention to who lies to you. Pay attention who you should not take their word at face value going forward. And that's the whole thing, I think, with central bankers is that, Satoshi wrote about it in some of his early writings about, the trust. I think that was actually even in the white paper, the trust that's required. And the fact that we have too many examples in history of it being betrayed. And so at what point do you stop trusting the person that's lying to you? It's kind of the same sort of thing around just mainstream media in general. It's after the last 5 years, I don't tune in to any of that stuff anymore because those entities and those organizations, those voices have proven to not be trustworthy. And you can't forget that. And it's weird because time makes you want to forget that. And society certainly encourages you to forget that. So, yeah,
Trust me, bro.
I killed it.
Am I dead? Can
You
I
anyone
killed
hear
can
it,
me?
throw in
JC.
another
Hello?
topic if you guys want. I can throw in a topic. So when you guys had Larry on the show, afterwards, I asked a question before but we had to shut it down. Was how much faster do you think people will understand self sovereignty if the next crisis is going to be bigger than '08, like Larry said?
Is anyone speaking? Because I can't hear. And since I'm not hosting, I'm not pushing any buttons today.
No, I think my question just sucks.
You're pushing my buttons there, big guy.
Wait, broadsword. I kind of don't really understand the question.
Okay, I guess I'll touch on it more. Like, it surprises to me that people still don't understand the self sovereignty as much, and I'm wondering like how we can speed it up, or how when people start getting screwed again in like the way that it was '08, because Larry was saying like there's a possibility that this next crisis is going to be bigger than '08. It's going to be like, the big print is coming, so it's going to be worse. And I'm just wondering, like, are people going to start catching on to this quicker? Are they not? And I don't know. I was just throwing a topic out there. It doesn't matter.
Vinny's got his hand up. Vinny, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I wasn't. I was just jumping on to say hey. Yeah, I was sitting
Hey, hey,
on.
hey.
How you guys doing? I was sitting on the space last night with Joe. I heard that was a topic of conversation, and yeah, I know a lot of people similar to O'Hare, and they've made a lot of fiat money in the fiat world. They might be like executives at these large companies and stuff, and they just they're thriving in this world, and so they don't really have any incentive to look into Bitcoin deeply. So yeah, I just wanted to jump up and say hey to everyone.
Totally agree. I think the incentive is actually the opposite. They have incentive because they're so rooted in the current and it's their whole makeup, their job, their value, everything. So they're actually looking for anything to actually negate Bitcoin. So it's like I forgot who asked the question, but how many times are we going to go around the trust mountain here? And as somebody who's not as smart as a lot of people that come up and speak in here, I can tell you from personal experience, I'm really dumb and it takes me a long time to learn. And I can say it from personal things like uh, relationships, even where it's like, no, I should have pulled the plug a long time ago, but I would go around the mountain of trust and realize that it was me who really just needed to stop smashing my face against that cement wall. So unfortunately, that question is going to be different for various entities, businesses, governments, personal opinions and whatnot, because we're all different. So it goes back to the whole saying of people will get Bitcoin at the price they deserve. So it's really hard. We can do a lot of speculating and whatnot, but I think that question is just going to answer itself over time when, to me, it's just things have been rolling out just like game theory that when I was getting into Bitcoin 8 years ago or whatever it was now, no big deal. We would throw these things out. And to me, it's just kind of playing out like a script, like a train wreck in slow motion where it's like, holy crap. Like it's hard for me to even believe that back then we were talking about government adoption and all this other stuff, and just watching it is quite shocking, but it's actually going right according to, the plan or the game theory that a lot of the great Bitcoin minds were discussing back in the day. So to me, this is all, I hate going back to revisit some of these conversations because it's stuff we talked about, damn near a decade ago, but it's still fascinating because it is actually happening in real time.
I will say I have a buddy who I've tried to orange pill, and he'll sometimes just like argue with me and just like rattle me because he knows it like pisses me off. But and I kind of got that vibe from him last night when I was listening to him kind of going in circles with some of the other people up on stage right now,
Yeah,
actually.
Vinny, I'll bring marriage and stuff into this as well. When you start looking for just the reasons to not, or the reasons to hate somebody, or with a human, you're going to find those things. And it cracks me up because I was in back channels talking with one of the people about him trying to orange pill his friends who are, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel looking for reasons to, you know, count Bitcoin out and disqualify it. And they're going, well, quantum computing. Well, look at this core dev thing, blah, 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 blah. And, yeah, they're right. There are some things that, we as in the Bitcoin network need to do to be vigilant against these things. And there's ways we can, go around these things. However, if you actually analyze the current fiat system and Bitcoin side by side under the same scope, it's laughable at the differences of like, okay, guys, the current fiat system is an absolute shit show right now. Like you pick the problem, but look at Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, there you could arguably say that there's some chinks in the armor, but you know what? Comparatively speaking, this is a no-brainer, guys. Like you're idiots to even be scraping. But once again, they're not looking for like with an open mind saying like, hey, what's the truth here? When we compare these two systems on an equal basis, who's going to win? It's a dumb argument. No matter what, if you're looking at energy use all the way down to quantum to whatever other FUD is involved in that. And it becomes a thing of like I mentioned, the relationship where it's like you're not looking for, hey, how can we save our marriage? We're looking for like, what are all the flaws in this a-hole so I can get out of this thing? And it's like that's what these guys, these TradFi guys are doing. They're just trying to pick any fault they can find to support their narrative and say, no, we need to get Bitcoin out of this equation.
Hey, Lauren, I'm Chinese, so you can't say the C word.
Oh, my bad. I apologize. I like to feel like I'm a token citizen of every country. Uh, just I have a story, so I'm not. There's no offense here, man. I love everybody. Oh,
One's
Nikolai,
fine.
buddy, chime on in here.
Hey, what's up, guys? Um, you know, I guess you could file this under, you might want to get some in case it catches on. Um, on one side is you sort of have the apologist for the regime, the apologist for the status quo, and they have an argument, and then on the other side is you have um, I mean, where do I begin? You have uh, the Biden administration seizing Russian foreign reserves, which I think will go down in history as a seminal moment. You have the repudiation of electoral outcomes across Europe. Um, you have, I mean, yesterday that article hit the tape where if you want to take was it $3,000 in cash out of your Spanish bank account, you have to justify it to your bank. The Twitter files showed us coordinated, very sophisticated, coordinated effort across multiple agencies um, to censor and deny Americans their constitutional First Amendment rights. We have distrust in electoral outcomes, no voter ID laws, like the you know so and then you can go all the way to the real heavy stuff where they literally changed the private property laws over decades. So in a crisis, they can you don't own your stock, they can it's in a pool and they can seize the pool, right? And so they can literally bankrupt you through no fault of your own if you own a position in a
Hey, Nikolai,
security.
can I just add a couple of things into your examples there? One of
Please.
which was because this is happening worldwide and it's worse in a lot of countries, like the guy in England somewhere who was just driving around with 1,000 pounds, whatever, dollars, and they were going to just seize it from him. We have to. Puncher brought a great story up about one of his buddies, and this was years ago, carrying around if you don't have a logical explanation to them in their book, they get to decide if it makes sense or not. They could actually seize it. So I mean, there's other things. Grant was on here the other day talking about he heard that he has the home down there in Malibu that some of the shoreline that is has been burned up, and the homes it could get seized eminent domain by the state. So like the list goes on and on and on and on. So I just wanted to maybe tack on a couple more on that wonderful list of examples there. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay, and I'll land the plane. So, so where do you sit? You know, in the middle of this kind of pro-regime, pro-status quo argument, and this kind of awareness, like, wait a minute, you know, maybe it's not like they told me it was, you know, and there's two miracles that we're experiencing in real time, and one is Bitcoin. It just exists as a permissionless system outside um, the old guard, the old system. And it's just a miracle that we're here and we have this opportunity. And then I would say the second miracle is tangentially related, and it's that we're here right now, uh, freely discussing this. And you know, X, you know, I know YouTube is censored sometimes, but there's a lot of critical content on YouTube or Rumble or Substack. So there's this, you know, this miracle of they can't shut us down like they could have in 1960 when you had three networks, you know, with deep ties to the military industrial complex, controlling the narrative. So as dark as it seems at times, I feel pretty blessed, you know, to be here.
100%. Yeah, no, there's other things. Even like Terrence and I were having a phone conversation yesterday and going deep about, generational things. And one of the things we talked about was income tax, and another was inheritance tax, and how anybody with some means could really get thumped by this inheritance tax thing. I don't know if Terrence wanted to get into that further. And I was telling a story even about, we run to all of these things thinking that we'll be sovereign or we'll be protected from some of these, uh, you know, s- Joe, it's a miracle, buddy. How are you? I thought if we poked Joe enough, maybe he would jump up and say some stuff. Joe, I'll just shut up right now if you wanted to reply to anything, because I know sometimes you don't have a lot of time in between sessions and whatnot. Joe, did you, there's ask dialing. Did you ask a request to come up on stage, buddy? I guess so. Anyway, I'll get back to, hey, do you guys want to mute his mic then until he realizes he's up here?
Yeah, I
Puncher
gotcha.
or Cosmo? Thank you. But no, we were going deep on that, and people run to gold. And interestingly, I was telling Terrence a story about how my mother had this ounce of gold, and she was trying to cash it in. I don't even like the term, but she was going around to these different pawn shops and gold and silver people, and they all wanted to assay it first. And this is literally last month, like 2 weeks ago, and it was ridiculous. And I just thought, this is so crazy in a world where our fiat system is supposedly functioning properly. She was having a hell of a time, and it wasn't like in a brick form or anything else. It's actually like flakes, and so it's like they couldn't just figure it out on the spot. She went to 3 or 4 different places. She finally ended up selling it to my brother for $2,000, and basically taking a hit, because at that time I haven't looked at the price of gold because I don't really give a shit what it is. But she took a hit and just sold it to my brother for 2 grand. Like, how ridiculous is, like, we're all trying to heap into this metal called gold as our savior of value and sovereignty, when it doesn't even make sense in today's day and age. So lots of interesting things to tack on to what Nikolai said there.
Gold just it's just so. I mean, I don't mean to offend gold bugs because they have it right, and it is, you know, it's proven to be a pretty good store of wealth. But my goodness, trying to spend it or trying to take it across the border, it's just, there's just no comparison with Bitcoin.
It's a great
Yeah.
collectible. I have one piece of gold. It's a $20 piece. It's got a beautiful eagle on it. It's incredible to see that actually we didn't have dead presidents on our money up until like more recently. We had Lady Liberty on one side and an eagle on the other. Like the memes of America about freedom and liberty. And then it says $20 on it. $20 for an ounce of
Yeah,
gold
no,
today
those
that sells for what? 3,300, 3,400. It's like that is powerful just to remember that, you know, less than less than a century ago and what's occurred in that time frame. I think it's powerful. I think like Bitcoiners should, you know, try to find instances of this to teach your children with and to show your grandkids, because I'm holding on to this for that exact reason, because one day I want to have these conversations with you know, the next generation and make sure they really understand concretely what's occurred here.
Yeah, 100%. I think the museum analogy is great because it's like Peter Schiff says stuff like, "Well, it's been around for 1,000 years," as if that's his argument for then, therefore, we should keep doing it. It's like, okay, well, you know, throw anything in there, the or not, the gramophone and the Pony Express, and like all of these things should be remembered in, you know, museums and whatnot, and look back on like, hey, we used to listen to, you know, things on this recording device or whatever else. But it's like, guess what, guys? Technology is moving on, and it's moving on quick. So if you want to stay with Grandpa Peter there, fly right at it. But if you really want to be involved in the next age of technology, you better get on board the ship here, because it's sailing fast.
Hey, Lauren,
Yeah.
Puncher is back. Do you want me to drop him since it's his co-host day?
I don't
No,
know
I
if
don't care. Terrence, I don't care. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
sometimes Punch leaves for a while because he has like a fiat meeting or something. So I didn't know if maybe that was one of these times, but was struggling to try to keep up with everything
I
here.
got dumped out for some reason. To TC's point, I think a lot of the value that goes into gold now is purely due to a misunderstanding of what gold is. I mean, people ask people if the dollar's backed by gold, and 90% of Americans will tell you that it is, and it's not. But ask people if, you know, that do understand gold, if they think that a gold standard is coming back, and they do, and it's not. So a lot of the value that's imputed into gold is wrong. And I'm a gold bug. I'm, you know,
Yeah, and I agree with you on that one. Like my grandfather, that's one of the ways my mother actually came into this gold. Is her dad actually was he was a hobby miner, but he did it to a pretty big degree. Like he had a big old, you know, plant and a backhoes, and was doing it in, you know, had a couple people working for him. So he did it in a pretty big scale for a hobby miner. But you know, she got some gold that way, and the amount of work and whatnot to do it, and then you know, you get Peter Schiff saying like, well, it has this other value. Like you know, we can use it in a watch, and we can use it in this and that. And in actuality, I think that his argument is actually the antithesis of what he's saying, which is like, hey, we've priced out gold because we're using it as a monetary unit. We priced it out for other uses that it could have for humanity. And I say like, hey, we should actually not use it as a money, and then we can actually have it be beneficial to humanity. And I've written responses to him a couple of times, and you know, it fell on deaf ears, of course. But
he's
often,
making an argument that it's a commodity, which is
right.
fine. But that's not the argument, which is a different argument, that it's money. And more importantly, that it's good money that works, on which a system should be based. It obviously is not, because it has failed.
Well, I mean, look, again, the history is really important. And I think even most people in the Bitcoin space who talk about these exact things haven't actually taken that close of a look at the history. Um, you know, I hate this term gold backed, because the money actually was the gold. The gold and the silver was the money. And the paper money that came along, it's really cloth, but you know, paper money that we're all the kind that folds, was a scaling mechanism to help make the gold more transportable. And basically that also facilitated the movement towards, you know, fractional reserving, and eventually that whole system failing with a series of bank runs. If you looked at, you know, the old $20 gold coin, an old $20 bill was really a gold certificate, and it would literally had words on it. I have one of these too, where the biggest print on the whole thing, the largest size text on the whole bill, is the words "in gold coin." You could see it from across the room. So it says this, you know, this shows that the treasury has deposited $20 in gold coin, redeemable by the bearer on demand, right? And so the whole point of the paper money was as a, you know, freeing it up to be more portable and easier to carry around. and facilitating this fractional reserve system that eventually just said, you know, we're just going to take that gold out of the picture. And pretty soon we're all just passing around claim tickets, you know?
Well,
It's
TC,
wild.
Yeah,
that paper was required because of a flaw in gold's property as money, which is portability.
speed, right? Speed. We used to be able to travel at the same speed as this gold. Information would travel at the same speed because if you wanted to get information from your town to the next town, you had to send a runner, right? And you could slip some gold in there if you wanted to. But now, right, I can send information across the world in an instant, and gold is just so much slower, right? And so that's why I like the gold back stuff returning to gold lost. It's broken. It's done. We can already communicate way faster than gold can move. So, there is no world besides, the internet grids, everything falling apart. And in that case, you just want food and bullets, that gold would come back in any meaningful form because it's too slow. We've evolved past it.
You know what else is too slow? The current banking rails. I had to send 2 bank wires yesterday. It took me an hour and 5 minutes at the bank, and I had to fill out tons of paperwork. Then I had to pay $50 for the privilege. One was international, one was domestic. And then then the guy read to me, hey, if you made any mistakes on this, it's your fault. It's not our fault. And then you sit around for 3 days waiting for this money to show up on the other end as it passes through the system through 4 other banks or whatever it is, and intermediary banks. And it's just like, fuck, man, I could just send this money in an instant, basically for free on Bitcoin
Oh,
rails.
and don't forget they can
And
claw it back too.
yeah, and they can claw it back. Oh, by the way, they want to know what it's for. What are you sending your money here for? I need a detailed explanation. I'm like, this is so antiquated. It's insane. But I did end up orange pilling the bank teller who was helping me, and I sent him. The first thing I sent him is the video. What is the problem? Because I realized this guy probably doesn't understand that there's a problem.
Tell your banker friends, how easy is it to move $1 billion permissionlessly across the world for about 75 cents? That's what Bitcoin can do with
Which
final settlement in about 10 minutes. And it's a game changer. All the people that try to FUD Bitcoin, saying about the number of transactions per second and trying to compare it to Visa or something like that, that's the response, which is, how do you move $1 billion anywhere in the world permissionlessly for about $1 fee? With final settlement. I mean, it's mind blowing when you really compare correctly Bitcoin to those banking rails that you were describing.
which is the paradox, right? Because um, the markets and no coiners think that Bitcoin is the was that a
Fuck.
was that a
$5 wrench attack inbound.
I'm
no
sorry.
no
I just discovered the sound. I just discovered the soundboard. My apologies.
Oh
I
no,
wasn't going to go
pack
wrench
it up.
attack. What I was going to say is that because of Puncher's experience and because of the point that TC's making, Bitcoin is actually the risk off asset. And of course, we know the thing itself is predictable and never changes. Now, the markets disagree. The market trades at, risk risk on. But that's not how I view it. I view it as risk off. Sorry, I'm walking the dogs.
I thought that
You're
was
good.
Punchbowl
We
on the
we got
soundboard
Joe
again.
back up here. I
Hey,
think he's up here for real. Should we Joe, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was running and I think I accidentally joined. So sorry about that.
I knew it. It was an ass join.
Sorry about that.
No, we want you to join, man. We want you to chime in here.
Regarding what?
We were talking early, Joe, about your space last night, which I thought was fascinating with
Oh
the
yeah, I'm sorry for
down.
that. That was a mess.
No, no.
It
I
got
mean,
it got.
listen. I
I
thought it was
should never have invited Magoo. That was my biggest mistake.
Magoo.
I like
Magoo was
Magoo, but
Magoo was an issue, especially with the mute button. But I thought it
well,
was.
let me just tell you my thoughts on this. And this is just from a lot of experience of orange pilling TradFi guys, who was mostly who I talked to. Okay, and no disrespect, but like TC, when he joined you, like you cannot get these people. So they come out with a bias. Okay, let's just start from the problem. The problem is, and in many ways, it's similar to the bias in the Bitcoin community. You come in with a bias, and no matter what amount of facts you tell them, you're not going to overcome the bias. The way you reach inception, and if you don't believe me, look at the movie. You make the person believe it, okay? And the way to do that is you have to ask a series of questions that allow them to come to the realization, okay? Going up and saying, oh, what's the value of a custodial asset? What's that value? It has some value. There are countries where it's seized and they seized Russia's gold holdings. All that is in one ear, out the other. You know why? Because the vast majority of people, including, by the way, the vast majority of people who hold Bitcoin, they don't give a crap about self-sovereignty. It does. This is why I was texting Thomas. This is the critical flaw in the Larry Lepard school of thought that everything's going to go to hell and fall apart, is that 95% of them, once they hear that, they're saying, okay, I have no interest in this asset. I'm not going to buy an asset. I'm not going to buy something with the expectation the world will collapse and we'll be under a bridge eating cat food. That is not a good selling point. And my view is, if you present Bitcoin in that manner, you are hurting adoption. You are actually doing the opposite of what you seek, is to improve and move to a better system. So, all these horror stories about, well, they seized this asset, or I live in a poor country. They say, we live in the United States of America. There's a rule of law. You're a whack job. Tuning out. I'm done. Okay. That is never going to be effective for orange pilling. Now, if your goal is to, make someone look stupid, or, insult them, go right ahead. You're going to be very successful in that endeavor. But you have to understand that when you go into a situation with someone who has a cognitive bias, okay, no amount of facts will actually overcome that bias. Questions will. So, like, I take issue with a lot of the things people in Bitcoin repeat about the economic system. Generally, if I'm on my best, right, I will ask questions because it will expose the flaws in the thinking. And to be clear, like, there are massive flaws in Bitcoiners and how they present the current economic system. And in many ways, it's very similar, right? The bias that you have to overcome with O'Hare is just a greater amount of bias because of his hatred of the asset and his understanding of the world, as the bias of Bitcoiners about things like debt and the monetary system and how it came about. I mean, I was running people talking about how, well, global dollars came in, paper dollars and cloth came in as a scaling solution. That's only partially correct, right? The evidence was that the market actually demanded credit. And this is really the advent of the Eurodollar system. People wanted to spend now and not have to wait. So what did the market do? They said, yes, for utility purposes, we're going to increase, ledger system money. Ledger money was, in the 19th century. But we're also going to allow you free and easy access to credit. And the people demanded it, just like the people now demand 0% interest rates. They demand a bunch of government stimulus. This is, if you want to look at the genesis of why central bankers and congressmen have, screwed a lot of things up, look no further than looking in.
Oh shit, Joe! I fat fingered the
Yeah,
mute
so
button.
I was just going to
Complete
conclude.
accident.
You want to look at the genesis of most of the problems in our society? Look no further than the mirror, because we elect this and we demand people to do this. And you may say, "Well, I didn't demand it." Yeah, you're the 10%. The 80% say, "I want my stimmy checks now." That's what the 80% says. The 80% says, "Do whatever the hell you have to do, Fed. I don't care about the details. Do QE, do zero interest rates, do all this stuff. Do whatever you need to do. It doesn't matter." And then the principal will smash their fist against the desk and say, "No, it's not right. You're printing money out of thin air and taking my labor." I get it. Okay. I understand your conceptual argument, but in a populistic way, you're going to have people demand this thing. I mean, even conservatives, right, aren't really serious about controlling the debt. Even conservatives like Donald Trump, right, are saying lower interest rates, make it cheaper with inflation closer to 3 than it is 2, beyond the quote unquote BS target that was made up. So these things are really complicated, and the problem is that every single person, including myself, by the way, from virtual where I'm at, I'm not immune to this. Every single person comes at these things with biases. Okay, they come at them with biases about how they believe the world should work, and the world does not work how you want it to work. Okay, the world is a messy. And Thomas is exactly right. It's a messy, dynamic system where we struggle to even understand what is right in front of our face. The reason we can't agree on truth is not just because people are manipulating the truth and people are putting it out there in a false way. That is true, right? That is a true fact. But it's also insanely difficult to even get metrics and gauges on how the world works. It's very difficult to calculate, the state of the economy. I could show you 10 different charts, even if they're honest, good faith people trying to put them together, they will tell a crazy different story. And you see this in FinTwit all the time. So all of this is to say, like, when we have these discussions, it's important to recognize the bias. And if your goal is to overcome the bias, you need to let the person overcome them on themselves. You need to lead them You can't drag them to the water and make them drink. You need to make them want the water.
Hey
And the
Joe,
only way I've ever known to do it is ask questions.
I don't disagree with anything that you said there. But question for you is that, do you think that the type of perspective that O'Hare has, which I believe a lot of people in TradFi have, that they are increasingly, as time goes on here, deficit in their lack of like perception of what's happening here? It's kind of similar to me. And again, like this is a bit of a meme, but a lot of Bitcoiners draw a parallel to the advent of the internet and how people early on in the advent of the internet, if you talk to people in the year 2000 or 1995 even, people couldn't see what role that was going to play and what importance that had in the world. But with retrospect, we see clearly like this was an unstoppable force because of everything in the world becoming more connected and digital, et cetera. And with Bitcoin, there is in my opinion, a clear trend of there's more capital controls, there's a changing monetary order, et cetera. And I would expect some of these people that consider themselves so experienced in the TradFi world for decades would perceive at least some of that, or at least be able
Okay,
to talk
okay.
about it.
Hold on a second. That is a positive. That is a feature, not a bug for most of TradFi. The custodial controls are a feature. BlackRock would love to have all the custodial control of all the people that want to buy Bitcoin in their ETF. So when you say, well, don't they understand the risks of custodial the Bitcoin, and don't they understand how that undermines self-sovereignty? They're like, yeah, that's the point. We want to know where money's flowing. We want to have greater controls. We want to have fewer regional banks, ladies and gentlemen. That's a good thing. That's the stated position of the United States Treasury, that there's too many disjointed, unconnected banks. In a command and control economy, you want centralization. And for people to say, well, how could you be so stupid, TradFi, that you want centralization? They're like, well, that only makes our job easier.
Yeah, but I
So,
mean, if you
so,
look around the
so I
world,
wonder, like,
Joe,
what?
if you look around the world, there's just umpteen examples, just even in the last few years, of these dynamics going on. And it's fine if you are a privileged person living in a Western society and you feel comfortable about this and you think this is a feature, not a bug, to
Who's the
absolutely
most powerful
be
in our
blind
society?
to the fact that
Who,
there's a ton of human beings on planet Earth that are actually suffering from that same system. That's the thing that I
Who
have.
is the most powerful in our society? Wouldn't you agree with me that and I'll just ask it a leading question. Wouldn't you agree with me, sir, that the most powerful privilege in society are the ones that actually want the control, that stand to benefit from the control? And the people that are least powerful in society are the ones that are the have-nots. They're the ones who have the most to lose from the system you're describing, the lurch towards more centralization. So, so when you say these things, right? Like, how can the privileged people that have a lot of money, how can they not understand the risks of confiscation? They're saying, wait a second, this is net helpful for us. We want this. And I'm not saying that's right. Okay, please don't at me and tell me now you're Joe, you're a statist. You
No,
want
no,
all this
no,
centralization and
I
control.
think I'm still being misinterpreted because
Because
it's not about for themselves. That's the point. They are privileged because they don't fear for that confiscation relative to
exactly.
themselves. But I'm saying, as an investor investing in companies that make products for the wider population, I'm sure these guys have things in their portfolio where there's companies that make products that they don't use and consume, but they understand that the world has a need for these things because there's X, Y, and Z problems out there. That's the perspective I'm talking about.
But the need of the world is not the same as the wealth of the world. Okay, the wealth of the world in a monetary network is concentrated in the hands of the few and the privileged. That's the facts. Okay, we've got some. I don't have the exact stat, but I always forget. It's either 70 or 80% of the wealth is held by like 5% of people on the planet. Okay. So when you're a businessman and you're saying, well, we have to, allocate to the needs of the many, you'd say, no, the goal is to advocate to the needs of the few. That's where the money's at. Why do you rob a bank? Because that's where the money's at. It's like, why are we going after the 7, 8, 9 billion people on the planet when they don't have all the money? The money's in a very small, slim cohort. So I think you're misidentifying the target. You're misidentifying, to use a business term, the total addressable market. The total addressable market is concentrated in the hands of the few, not the many.
I just think that like
Yeah, but
wealthy
the
people
solution,
who might have
solution.
like a warehouse full of classic cars that run on gasoline might see that a trend of the poor people that they are not might need some electric cars, or that's a trend that it's going, and they invest in that direction. I'm just pulling
The
that out as a
the
random
wealthy,
example.
the
It's like
wealthy, smart
where is
people.
the perspective that sees these kinds of longer term trends and directionality as far as the real nature of the world, even though they are not subject to the pains of that nature?
So the wealthy people, okay, if you talk to them actually, and I've had long conversations. I talked to a guy who's worth $1 billion, and why he owns zero self custody Bitcoin, but he loves the BlackRock ETF. He loves it. You know why? Because he says anything goes wrong, Joe, I'm going to hire you, and we're going to sue BlackRock. That's not how they think. They think about how do they haul another person into court to blame them. And if you're very, very wealthy, okay, extremely wealthy, I'm talking about, you want counterparties, you want insurance, you want hedges, you want a lawyer to sue. You can even sue your lawyer, by the way. Don't sue me, but you can sue a lawyer if the lawyer makes a mistake. That's why you get a lawyer. Okay, you have offset of risk to protect yourself, because once you are very wealthy, you have one goal: how do I stay wealthy? And how do I
Right.
protect
So
against
Swiss
everything?
bank accounts and business structures that protect them, again, it's the same kind of thing. Like, I feel like the same people that disregard Bitcoin are the same ones putting money in a foreign bank account, or, taking it out of the system in some way in their own context. And
Yes.
these are perspectives that I would expect those people to actually be able to reason about.
Yeah, I mean, look, I disagree with your last statement there. I don't believe you can approach, what we know. Again, read Jonathan Haidt, the Righteous Mind. What we know about how the human mind works is the elephant and the rider, right? Our elephant, our subconscious, our emotion drives most of our decision making, and the rider pretends to control the elephant. He desperately, our logical side desperately tries to justify what the elephant is doing. And the reason why I bring that up is because my only, from studying this issue, my only understanding of how to address this in a broad way consistently has always been: you got to ask questions. You got to make them understand the issue by themselves.
Let's go to Tomer. He's got his
Let me.
hand up. Or I guess, yeah, or
um, just kind of quick. I think there's a little bit of talking past each other here in terms of you're talking to each other about who you ought to talk to and what you ought to say. But for me, one of you is talking to ultra wealthy people, another one's trying to talk to people who have savings, and maybe there's another example of talking to somebody that's just an earner without much capacity to save. But that aside, I mean, I think part of what Joe is getting at, which is something that we were talking about way earlier when we were talking about the podcast that Lauren and I did with Eric Stacks as well. It's like we began that when we were saying something like, how did your spiritual journey begin? And for many of us, it was, well, the world turned out not to be the way we were raised. We were told it was when we were raised to believe certain things. And I think that's a big part of coming to terms with Bitcoin. Like, many people, especially those living in the first world and doing okay or even well, don't see a problem in the world. And it's not until something like the housing crisis happens, or the stock market crash happens, or they lose their job to something and then they can't find another one, that then they say, hold on, this isn't the world that I thought it was. And their view of the world is shattered, and then there's an opportunity for them to start to ask, well, what is the world like? And I'm prepared to accept new truths. But when you're not really open to new truths because you have a model of the world that seems to work well for you, it's very, very hard for someone to dissuade you, even if they ask a lot of why questions, the because you're not the whys don't penetrate deep enough for you to see, well, the system's fake. If the system is indeed fake, you need something to shock you into awareness. And I think that's why Bitcoin is, I mean, again, to something else we were discussing earlier, Bitcoin isn't for the people who fail these experiments, the ones with the monkeys, the ones with the psychology that we were talking about, where people shock some presumed victim because of authority telling them, or they stand up because everybody around them stands up. It's for the people who say, why are you guys standing up? Or, no, I will not shock them. and and that's and that's who's adopted Bitcoin so far. And you just take a look, like Michael Saylor is a very persuasive fellow, and he's put hundreds, he's put thousands of hours into sending out his message in every podcast he can
Does
possibly
Michael
get on.
Saylor self custody his Bitcoin? Just for the record.
But that's not the point that I'm making, Joe. The
It's
point
a
that I'm making is how
sidetrack.
few
Don't
people,
sidetrack.
No, it's the
how
core issue.
uh,
It's the core issue.
No, it's Joe. You don't know what core issue I'm getting to. I know you've got a core. And you're making a perfect example of my case. Different people have different core issues. But the point that I'm making is look at, relatively speaking, how few people he's managed to persuade, even though he's putting all his money where his mouth is. The overwhelming majority of corporations, and by overwhelming I mean all the corporations in the world minus 100 at most, right? And all these people haven't t- haven't even explored the message enough to dabble or listen to it. And he's not saying self custody, right? He's saying follow my playbook, which isn't even a self custody playbook. So this is a very hard thing, and the world moves very slowly, and people change very slowly. The fact that Bitcoin is as valuable as it is already, despite having to confront that, shows just how broken the system is for so many people who are not necessarily multi-billionaires, not necessarily, but savers, people who have a work ethic and have been betrayed by the system, and realize that they've been betrayed and are looking for something that won't betray them. But now you go ahead, Joe, or Puncher, whoever was next.
Yeah, Puncher. Go ahead.
Well,
Sorry, can I just say?
well,
Can I
Joe, I
just
don't
my
disagree
mute
with.
was unlocked. I'll go to Puncher. I just want to point out
Sure.
one quick
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
sure.
Okay, the reason why I interrupted you rudely, and I don't mean to undermine your point, is because of the discussion I was having with TC. Because if you weren't in the room last night, he came up and argued fundamentally to O'Hare that the one of the fundamental reasons to buy Bitcoin was self custody. Okay, that was an attractive feature, and there's value in Bitcoin because of self custody, self
Okay.
sovereignty,
Yeah.
etc. And the reason
I,
why that's significant is if major capital allocators, nay, billions of people, excuse me, billions of dollars, they're putting billions of dollars in Bitcoin, they're trusting third parties, that seems to contradict the selling point that TC was trying to use to convince O'Hare and Jaguar to value Bitcoin.
But my point was
yeah. Fair
about
enough.
people understanding that there's a world where there's capital controls on others, and others will be having an increasing demand for those properties. You don't have to self custody yourself to see that. You could just buy IBIT shares, realizing, oh crap, Bitcoin exists in a world that has a clear trend of more capital controls, more friction for the ordinary person. Ha ha ha, I'm so fortunate that's not me. But hey, that seems like a pretty clear trend that I can actually put into action now with Bitcoin.
Yeah,
The hard part about that PC is it doesn't affect them
exactly.
personally. And I
That's
look,
I know, but they
this is
call
why,
themselves
yeah.
investors, and that's a key aspect of investing. That's my point
but
again. Do they
their
use every
investment.
product of everything
I
they
agree.
invest
No,
in?
but they want to buy products. They want to invest in things that everyone is going to use, but not only everyone.
That's my point.
Where big pools of money are going to use them. They want to invest in Nvidia because major capital allocators need to buy those chips. Okay, so it's not about how do we get the biggest network and the most amount of people. It's how do we get the biggest pot of money. And the biggest pot of money is in countries where they don't have to, in large part, deal with the issues you're talking about. So it's contradiction. There's a contradiction in what you're arguing because if I'm a capital allocator, I don't care whether it's 7 billion, 9 billion, or whether it's two people that are going to put in $25 billion. In fact, I'd probably prefer the two people with $25 billion because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to allocate capital where money's going and where it's safe.
Well, that is why the Bitcoin revolution is going to come from the bottom up. It's why the global South and Africa are adopting and weaving it into their everyday lives, albeit slowly through layer 2 and layer 3s. But it's happening. And corporations are just like people. Joe, I agree. Your way last night to kind of logically take them down this path was probably the best way, despite, Magoo jumping in every 2 seconds, ruining your line of questioning. But to my friends who are like my row house buddies, it's easier for me. I ask them questions, but I don't ask them logical questions. I ask them questions like, "Hey, what keeps you up at night? Hey, what are you worried about? Oh, I'm worried about my credit cards are maxed out and my kids' tuition's coming up. I have no freaking idea how I'm going to pay it, and I'm working my ass off, and my wife's working, and then once they tell me all their problems on an emotional level, I start telling them about the solution, which is Bitcoin. My rich friends, my Wall Street friends, I try to go down the very logical path with them. But it's a very hard argument because when I ask them, what's your problem? What keeps you up at night? They're like, I don't know. I'm not sure whether I want to buy that third beach house or not. My wife's up my ass. But it's never like existential stuff. Their biggest problems are way first world problems, which aren't even problems at all. So to get them on an emotional level, I just can't, because they're benefiting from the system as it's currently constructed. And I try to get them on a logical, like, think about what's happening now, but it's a very, very difficult argument because they don't have a need to know.
So Puncher, what I would say on that point about how you interact with people, I kind of I listened to a lot of that spaces that Joe hosted last night, and it was tough listening to some of it because it was a little chaotic. But at the end of the day, I kind of agree with this idea that a Socratic method, where you're trying to inform through the strategic use of questions, allows the person to become vested in the answer. And once they become vested in the answer, they join you. So like in politics, where I spend a lot of time, that isn't a very effective way for engaging with constituents. When they come with a problem, like, I don't want this to happen, I said, well, what do you think we should do? And then you talk it through with them, and then they come to the conclusion. If you tell them the answer, they're just not vested and they don't feel good about themselves. And so I think it's a much better approach to, um, I would use the word seducing people to a point of view.
There is a challenge with the Socratic method, and that is that Socrates was sentenced to death for using it. Right? Like if you ask enough questions, people get annoyed enough that they tell you to go away, or they say stop doing this or be put to death. And in Socrates' case, he said, "Well, put me to death then, because I won't do it." But it's not a foolproof method, right?
Yeah, I
For all
think
the people
Tomer
he convinced, he convinced more people to have him put to death.
in the extreme, a Socratic method is obnoxious. Um, but I do think it's an effective tool if used appropriately to engage uh, someone on discovering a new point of view. I think if you just constantly say and why and why and why, they're gonna pull a gun out on you. Um, but it also helps reveal, if you use it at the outset to engage, whether or not the person's even interested in that level of conversation. Like, you can't walk up to somebody when, let's say you walk into a local tavern, guys are hanging out watching the game, and you say, "Hey, have you heard the good Bitcoin news?" They're going to tune out and put you in the crazy camp. If you ask them a couple questions like, "Hey, are you worried about your bills?" They're like, "Fucking leave me alone. I'm having a beer and I'm watching the game." Right? They're not ready
But
to
I
engage.
think
So there's a
this is the lesson that many of us have learned. Like, and the longer you've been in Bitcoin, the more you eventually come around to this point of view, which is you can't sell this thing to everybody all the time just because you find it so fascinating and it's so amazing to you and it's so relevant to you and it's so relevant to your values. Doesn't mean that that's true for everyone, and that and despite the fact that it has 150 different arguments in its favor, none of them might land with some people. And so you just have to be prepared to for your own sanity, to move on and not to expect to persuade everyone. Like, if you're dealing with a mob, like like what the room last night sounds like, you're not going to convince them under any circumstances. They're just going to shout you down, and you're going to be, you're going to be you're going to be the poor victim there, and incredibly frustrated. So for the sake of your own sanity is all I'm saying. I'm not saying don't try to orange people, but know when you're banging your head against the wall and stop doing it, because it's not good for you or them. And I don't mean to be negative about it. I'm just trying to say, like, pragmatic. Bang your head against something that will crack from you banging your head against, rather than against a wall.
Yeah, June Seth. I don't know if any of you guys know him. He's a friend of mine. He will tell you that there is 0 point in Bitcoin evangelism. 0 point. Either the market finds it out, figures it out over time, and figure out the fundamentals, or you're just wasting your time. And I agree with the earlier comments that Puncher made. Like, they say necessity is the mother of invention. Need is really the in my view, the proximate cause of any sort of change in mindset. You have to get people to a place where they understand why they need it. And the reality is, most people, by the time they understand why they need something like Bitcoin, it will be far too late, or they'll be dead.
Yeah, that's great points by everyone. Not everybody is the same. I learned a technique when I worked for a pretty large publicly traded company. Me being based in Cali, the CEO and the CFO would fly out here and we'd have these board meetings and we'd say, we need to do this. And that would just go nowhere. But if we implanted the idea in their heads, even if it was just like we made sure we talked about something where they were in earshot, just some way to get an idea in their heads, they would come back later, like 2 trips later, and say, hey, we should do this, and almost say it verbatim, because then it became their idea and their baby and they realized it. It was like a whole thing of self-discovery, and then they owned it. So I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways, but just planting seeds can be beneficial. Having talks, having discussions, presenting problems, and later on down the road, maybe it's the third touch, fifth touch, whatever it is. Once they realize it themselves, at least they'll have the info ready to go, like, okay, hey, I need to pull the trigger on this, or I need to do more research in this. I don't know who was next, Cosmo or Terrence. Do you know? There's a lot of
Yeah,
hands
I
up.
think we had Vinny, Taylor, Mars, and then Pubby.
Yeah, I just want to jump back up here. Yeah, I was in an Uber just now on my way back home from the airport, and I actually threw you guys on speaker, and my Uber driver, I could tell that her eyes were kind of like, you know, her eyebrows were like kind of crinkling, and I could see like the wheels turning in her head, and she almost missed my stop actually, and she actually took down my information just because you guys were so entertaining, and also the stories that you were telling were like awesome too. Because I think Puncher was talking about his wire transfers and the how it took like an hour and a half to just even do that. I think Cosmo was talking about like his gold coin and how he was going to share that story with his like children and future generations, and I could tell like she was definitely interested. And when she dropped me off, she took down my information. I told her I'd get her on these spaces and kind of have her sit in on these. And she said that you guys were like super entertaining and down to earth and just made it easily digestible. And so yeah, I think a strategy is just we can all go take some Uber rides and just throw Bitcoin Today on, and we can Bitcoin orange pill a bunch of people.
Trying to get those Uber rides with the billionaire drivers can be tricky at times, you know.
Yeah, we didn't get O'Hare, but at least we got an Uber driver.
I'll just say it took me 2 years to get George Noble to be open to holding Bitcoin, and before the end of the year, I will get George Noble holding Bitcoin, if you know who that is. So
Dilly knows who that is. Who was it? Old Taylor
Yeah,
next?
go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, so I put this little political
We can't we
Daddy
can't
doesn't
hear
hear
you.
anything.
Yeah, the internet's out in India. Sorry,
Is that
everybody.
better? Is that
Much
better?
better. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good
Yeah,
now.
I had my thumb over the mic, I think. Um, put that little political spectrum chart up there in the nest, and so I think that this is often where Joe has a lot of differences in his view of the world with people that are kind of in these rooms typically, maybe, or with a lot of us. And I think that Joe kind of sees the world through that top spectrum. I'm not trying to be condescending, Joe. I'm sure you're aware of this other spectrum, but like dark side, for example, or me, like I'd put
Old Taylor
myself
is saying that Joe's on the spectrum, everybody. I don't know if that's
I'd put myself to the right of that, we the people on that bottom spectrum down there. And so I think that's just a completely different view of the world. Like, I don't consider Donald Trump to be a conservative, like Joe stated earlier, or or even
Donald
either of the
Trump is on the
political
spectrum
parties.
too, people.
So I just think that that's a pretty typical, for Bitcoiners to know that bottom chart and to kind of agree with that, because a lot of them were libertarians before they were ever Bitcoiners. But people coming from TradFi or that world that may not view the world through that lens. So I think that what happens is people end up talking past each other frequently because they're coming at the world from completely different viewpoints.
Yes, that's a great perspectives. Absolutely, looking at the elephant from different perspectives. Who
Mars,
I
go
think
ahead.
we can stretch it on a little bit, because I know that at least one of my two co-hosts, Hard Stop, involves taking the dog for a walk. But considering the dog has used the bathroom on his floor, he can actually stay a little longer. So maybe we can stretch this one out a little bit. Mars, go
What's
ahead.
up? How's it going?
Great, man. How you
Long time
doing?
no see,
Good.
dude.
What's up,
Yeah.
Cosmo? What's up, Lauren? Terrence? I have a lot of opinions on a lot of things, so of course this is an interesting conversation, so I'll just keep it super brief. But like, I do fully believe that the world doesn't need to end in order for Bitcoin to succeed. And in fact, I think it has a very valuable place in the global existing monetary and geopolitical system, as it is today, right? So like, it really resonates with me when Joe C is talking about, kind of fighting the doomerism because like I personally like the longer I've been in the space, the less a doomer I've become because I've kind of heard these things over and over again. Then we went through COVID, and a lot of people take COVID and they're like, "Look, the world's gonna end. Look what happened in COVID." And me, I've actually had the opposite reaction. I'm like, "Look, we survived COVID." And for some reason, this existing fiat system still running, So like, that's where I'm at these days. And then secondly, like just to the point about how like the need for self sovereign way of life, the discussion earlier about like how capital controls are basically enslaving large populations all around the world. I don't know that that necessarily means that a self-sovereign way of life will be adopted in the future by these people. In fact, I think if you look at history, it actually leads to just a new form of centralization, a new form of tyrannical control. If anything, these people are just going to roll over to the new great man leader or whatever it might be, right? Like just because they need self-sovereignty in these impoverished places doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. In fact, if anything, if there is a political turnover, it just turns over to some new form of tyranny. That's all.
Those are great points. I agree with you 100% because it seems like you get what you focus on all the time. And when you focus on doom and gloom, it's hard to stay loving and positive and happy and in a better space. So I'm with you on that one because I struggle myself, going like, oh no, we're all going to hell in a handbasket. So those are great points, man. Awesome perspective. I think we'll let Joe respond to that really quickly before we head it over to Pubs because I think he threw his hand up in direct response to something there. Joe?
Yeah. So, okay. What Mars brings up, which is spot on in my view, is if you were to ask me very simply why I like to hold Bitcoin, why I think it's a miraculous discovery, and why I will never sell my Bitcoin anytime soon, is because I think the world's going to end up continuing on a lot like it is today for the foreseeable future. And you may say that's depressing. You want to move to hyperbitcoinization. You want society to collapse so we can rebuild. I understand that wishful thinking. I think that it's, in my opinion, I can cite reasons why I've thought about this deeply. I think it's highly improbable that that scenario plays out. The Larry the Part scenario, I think, is highly improbable. Now, the question is like, well, you want people to come to Bitcoin, right? And you do genuinely, a lot of people in Bitcoin want them to get exposed to this and make a rational decision about why they want to hold some of this. That's some part of their portfolio. Why you would want that. And to me, okay, one of the things you got to go back to, I think, and as a philosophy major, I really did appreciate studying the Greeks and the ancients, and not to say other schools of philosophy aren't helpful, but one of the things that I always took away and never really left my worldview is, how Plato described, the threat and issues associated with direct democracy. That he thought ultimately the general citizenry makes poor decision. They are, in his words, roughly translated, unqualified to assess the world around them, and you need I think the masses are too easily swayed by like emotion, rhetoric, demagogues. You need these sort of well-reasoned, wise rulers to make decisions on their behalf. And he rejected the notion that every single man, woman, and child is going to be able to make these decisions and arrive at these things. Now, how does that relate to Bitcoin? Because I think, practically speaking, there are plenty of very smart, sophisticated people in society who are understanding the importance of Bitcoin and they're acting on it. But I don't believe that, at least in the near term, you're just going to have a mass event where every single man, woman, child understands that because it's a complicated issue. It requires a very reasoned, nuanced view of the world. And your ability to educate them, I think, is slummed to none. You're going to get some people, you're going to get some early majority and early adopters, but it's going to take not just years but decades, perhaps even centuries before you can really break through to everybody.
Joe, I really like that. For me, I am in the camp that I really hope that we don't go to, and I love this thing, and it's all yours, but the whole cat food under the overpass thing is hilarious. So I try to use that as much as possible. But I really hope we don't go to that. And if I would, throw my hat in the ring on like, do I think we're going to? I would say that I'm agreeing with you that we're not, and I'm 51+% that hopefully we just transition smoothly with the current fiat system rails for a while, but then Bitcoin slowly takes over. And I don't even want to guesstimate what kind of time frame we're looking at or whatever, but I really hope we don't have like a crash and burn type scenario, because that would really be devastating, like a lot of death, mayhem, pain, like it would be awful for humanity. So I really hope we're able to make that transition in that way, but I really like that outlook and perspective, and I'm definitely on that team. Pubs.
Good afternoon, ladies
Hey,
and
buddy, what's
gentlemen.
up? We were going to invite you to our party, but it's an open bar, so we're going to
Oh,
actually, we have a guest list. We're actually going to put you as
uh,
a please refuse this guy if he shows up on that list. How are you?
good man, good. Now this is great stuff. And Bitcoin during your journey is there's always a time for reflection. Now I'm looking at coming up on almost two halvings of where I started, where we are, and yeah, I like to when you were starting Orange Pill, I remember that the Socratic method is fantastic. It's only fantastic though when you're talking to somebody that is actually logical and has a um, a sense of intelligence and history about them. Many today are just sort of emotional. Number go up. You can reason with some, but if they don't have the background or they don't understand that there's something wrong, you're never going to convince them. Okay. All you can tell them is number go up. That's about it. So I just wanted to jump up to say that, man, when you're moving forward in this direction, uh, the ones that have been here, stay humble, stack sats. It's the humble people that are thoughtful people that see what Bitcoin represents. Numbers going to go up. I mean, that's just cooked in the books kind of thing. But yeah, you have to really you have to talk to someone that's willing to admit they're wrong, and that's a Socratic method. Someone's got to admit, you know what, your logic, your view is better than mine, and I can change mine. But most people won't change their view on much in life. They just won't change it. And yeah, it's a fool's journey and errand, just trying to convince somebody about Bitcoin. So stay the course, do what you do, and yeah, after 16 years, yeah, Bitcoin's here to stay. We all know this.
And Pubby's been in it for 17 years, everybody. Who is next, guys? Matt or
2000,
Nicola?
2005, I bought my
He
first.
got in 2005, man.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
Let's
uh
go.
he knew he knew
Yeah, you
Satoshi's
met
I,
mom.
Satoshi in 96 or whatever.
He met
you know,
Satoshi's mom, even
was
better.
that Scottie Pippen that said
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
No, no,
Pubby is
no.
Satoshi's dad.
I went to a Bulls game and sat with Satoshi and watched Scotty play in the mid '90s. Hey, I
Take
wanted to
five,
say,
baby.
listen, I wanted to say something. We heard this sort of, kind of pro status quo argument. Things have gone on this way, and for a long time, and that anybody that thinks that there's a pivot or a change coming is kind of a ideological, ignorant doomer. Um, and I would say the counter argument to that, and here I would cite Ray Dalio, who's written. He's working on his fourth book, but Dalio is a very disciplined thinker and has looked across the broad swath of time and history. And Dalio, that argument that everything's going to kind of continue as it has been, so don't sweat it. Dalio would call that a normalcy bias, and he would say that the reason people think that is because it's always been that way during their lifetime. But when you zoom out, the opposite is true. The reality is that you have paradigm shifts and regime changes. You had in the last 500 years, we had the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the British, and we've had for 100 years or so the Americans. And so what is actually true is that you have changes throughout history, and that the status quo doesn't last forever. Now, I can't pinpoint when it's going to end. But what Ray does in his most recent book, the Changing World Order, I think he identifies 17 variables, and I can't remember all 17, but there are things like debt levels, and he even talks about natural disaster. He talks about respect for the rule of law, social cohesiveness, things like that. And when you look critically and objectively, um, uh, and what Dalio says is that nations that get those kind of things largely right do well, and they rise to the top. And nations that get those things wrong do not do well. And he argues that the U.S. 100 years ago got those things right, and it rose to the top. And if you look at the education system, social cohesiveness, respect for the rule of law, debt levels, imperial overreach, we're not doing very well in the United States right now. So, I'm not saying that I know what's going to happen, but I just wouldn't be so complacent the way some voices on this stage would have you be. Thanks.
Yeah, interesting take. Let's go to macro. Let's go Matt. Parenthetical Matt.
Match. It's match grow.
How y'all doing?
Doing good,
Um,
man.
that's good to hear. No, so I had a point towards what Pubby was saying, but actually want to just,
Man,
I
Matt
guess,
sounds like he just smoked a fatty or something. He's like, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" Sorry, go
how
ahead, Matt.
y'all doing? No,
Different Matt.
I just wanted to make a point on, I guess, what Nikolai was just saying first. So, a lot of the time when you have these periods of transition in history, it is important to look at the life of just say the average person in the various societies. And unless there's a major hot conflict going on, even when you had, for example, the Nixon shock happen in the 70s, yes, things got harder. There was inflation, yada, yada. But the life of the average person didn't drastically change from the 60s to the 70s. There were cultural things going on, but I guess what I'm getting at is people are still going to work, they're still paying their bills, they're still just doing the things that normal people do. Even though there were major things changing from a financial standpoint at that time, and everybody here has seen the WTF happen in 1971 email or not email, but website rather. And so I don't know. I think there's two things can be happening at the same time where there's drastic changes in how systems are functioning, but how the average person lives their day-to-day life doesn't change all that much. And I think the individual has much more agency over that. Even though sometimes we all like to focus on what's happening at a larger scale, a lot of the time that doesn't impact anybody's direct life in as meaningful of a way as they can impact it. So I just think I'm trying to continue to push back and just say, every individual has more agency over their own life than they would like to believe a lot of the time. And I think sometimes we do a disservice to that reality in the way that we talk about things. And then lastly, I just wanted to say to Pubby, there is no logical conversation. All conversations are emotional. Human beings cannot make decisions without the emotion regulation center of their brain being a part of it, which is why if you get brain damage in that area, you literally cannot commit to a decision. It's kind of interesting. So the emotion regulation center of the brain is directly tied to decision making. So when you're having a Socratic conversation, it's still an emotional one. So I try to never present myself as logical because I know I'm not.
I
Matt, you
agree.
just solved the problem for me. Thank
If
you.
I
Now I know
let,
why.
let me just follow up, and
No,
yeah, pure
no,
logic isn't going to always win,
no,
obviously.
hubby.
However, there's people.
There's no
There's
such
people.
thing.
Shut the hell up,
That,
hubby.
what I'm saying is
No,
the ones that are here
hubby.
override them. All right, go ahead.
No, no, no. I'm just kidding.
Uh,
How many
I know.
beers? How many
No,
beers are
no,
you in, buddy? Come on.
no,
Give us
no.
the real
Just
answers. Are you on number two?
number one.
Okay. Go
I
ahead,
got
finish, and
about
we'll go to
a
old
third.
Taylor and then Danny. Go ahead.
Yeah,
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 I think
it's actually right.
important
It's
to
not an overarching thing. It's those that can realize when their logic, the logic of an argument outweighs their beliefs and even their emotion. Okay, there's different stages of that, different percentages. It's not going to be 100%, obviously, but it's the ones that can admit, you know what, I'm emotional about this. I got to step back. I got to think on this more. This person is right. I got to change my view on something. It's not going to be always 100%, but it's when logic overrides your emotion, you're making better choices in life.
And like that, Pubby crash lands that plane. Pubby had to chime in there because his emotions were triggered and he needed
No,
to respond.
listen. This is the rules of being on stage. If someone references
Completely
you,
irrational and
you get to.
illogical, Pubby. Now shut the hell
Oh,
up and drink your beer. We're going to Old Taylor.
you,
I'm just kidding, Pubby.
Yeah.
Love you,
I,
buddy.
So,
hey, Joe
Pub,
Carlos
can I
Harry
hear
always
you now?
gets to
Or?
respond. Son of a
Yeah,
bitch.
no, you're
All
good.
right, go ahead, man.
love you. Okay, something I don't really appreciate with Joe and Mars jumping in there to back him is classifying everyone with a different point of view as doomerism, because some of us think there needs to be change, and it's optimism that we feel in wanting to have that change. It's not doomerism. And I'm optimistic that the change that is necessary is going to be brought about, and I'm hopeful for it. And so it's not doomerism that leads me there, and I think that's a false dichotomy and a like bit of a slander against my viewpoint and red herring. So it's not a doomerism that leads me to want the change. It is optimism and excitement and positivity about the future and what Bitcoin's role can be in that.
Yeah. Nicola,
It's
hang on
not
one
that way
second.
for a lot of people, though.
Oh,
That's great
Terrence,
that you.
are you talking over me, buddy? Thank God, because it couldn't be a complete show unless we talked over one another. Nikolai
Oh,
came off
I
of
was
mute there, but hey, can we give Danny a shot? He actually was next like three hands ago, and let's
yeah,
let him weigh in, and then we'll go to you, Nikolai, if you don't mind. I just feel horrible because I know
yes,
Danny's been waiting down
yeah,
there.
yeah. Before we Yes, go to sir. Danny, I'm just fucking kidding. Danny, what's going on, man?
Probably one comedian per
Who
space, and
let Pubby up here?
that's Terrence.
God
I
damn
don't
it.
know. Yeah.
Hello, guys. Hello, Bobby.
Hello,
Um,
Governor.
well, I just wanted to give my third world perspective of what I've been listening to, especially what Joe Calasari was commenting. Uh, when I was listening to him, I, I just can't believe
Hey, Danny, do you know
how
Pubby?
different. Sorry.
Do you know Pubby?
Yeah, from spaces.
Oh, okay, not
Many
the other end of the
many
bar.
times in different spaces. But no, I just wanted to point out that how different we look, especially to Bitcoin, from the perspective of everybody. No, I want to give my perspective from a guy that was born and live in the third world, and it's so different my perspective from the vision that I listen from the people in the U.S., especially those who maybe are involved in Wall Street and financial institutions. It's very different, and I think they just can't understand what Bitcoin really means for people like me living in the third world. Here in Argentina, well, maybe most of you already know that we've been the inflation champions of the world, especially a few years ago. Not so much now, but even now we are around 20%. Coins literally my saver. Especially the pandemic came around. I had to close my business. I had a restaurant, and so I had no other thing to raise my family than Bitcoin. I it literally saved my life, and I said this several times on spaces, and many people just don't believe, but it was my path to a whole year or maybe more of feeding my family. This is reality. So I'm so far from the vision that Bitcoin is a financial asset that you have to speculate in and sell and buy and sell and make a difference in dollar terms. I really don't understand because Bitcoin is something totally different for me and for many people that I know that live in countries like mine. Bitcoin has literally saved our lives. So just wanted to expose this vision to this point of view, I would say, because it's very, very different from what I hear in this space, is that most of the people that join the spaces are from the first world, from the United States or Europe, and really don't have the slightest idea of what is living here. So I just wanted to point this out. Maybe uh, all can widen the perspective. You know, only that.
Hey, Danny, how old are you, sir? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no man. I am 59. I'm an old guy.
Okay. Nah, we're around the same age. Hey, next Friday, I would love to have you on if you could jump up and talk to you about living in Argentina, what it looked like. You've probably seen Argentina go through many variations of monetary debasement, and just what I'd love to hear and talk to you about what the practical result of all that was in people's lives and how they dealt with it, and when it got really bad, and then maybe it's getting a little better. And would you be open to that?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Send me a DM and we coordinate. No problem at all.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
All right, who we got? Nikolai, you were going to weigh in on the last topic. Go ahead.
Oh, oh yeah. By the way, that was beautiful from Danny, and God bless him for the salvation that he got through Bitcoin. I just wanted to say that there's this. I hear this argument that's sort of a kind of a technocratic overlord argument that you don't matter, that your passion isn't important, and don't be silly, don't be a doomer, which is just an ad hominem. It's a term that lacks intellectual rigor. It's an ad hominem attack. It's name calling. It's akin to a conspiracy, calling someone a conspiracy theorist rather than engaging them in the quality of their ideas. And you know, I would argue that you do matter, and that woven into this is kind of one of the most profound ideas of the last 500 years, and that is that your rights as a human being are inalienable and God-given, and no technocratic statist can abridge those rights. And so don't fall prey to the argument that forces bigger than you will control your destiny. Maybe, but don't give up the fight and recognize, that you as a human being are created in the vision of God, and that you have fundamental dignity, and your sovereignty as a human person matters. And some of the arguments I hear attempt to squash that and wrench it out of you, and don't buy into it.
Nikolai, I agree. Hey, Danny, can you DM me? For whatever reason, I can't DM you on your space. So DM me. It's Puncher. Thanks, buddy.
Or Danny, just show up
Oh,
next Friday. I think that's what
so
you're talking about, right, Punchy?
Yes, sir.
okay, I try. Well, I'm now right now driving, but I try to send you a DM when I get home.
Yeah, when you park.
Thanks, buddy. All right. Sorry about that, guys.
I see Joe.
Yeah. So I respectfully disagree with Nikolai. Calling someone a doomer is not
an ad hominem. If you understand what the term an ad hominem means, it's an attack about something other than the argument itself. For example, if someone says, "Oh, John doesn't understand climate control because he failed, science and he's a moron," right? That is an ad hominem attack. You're attacking the person itself.
How many
May I
years of
finish, sir?
Latin
May
did
I
you take,
finish?
Joe?
May I finish?
Let him finish, Nikolai.
I know, because he's got to interrupt because he knows he's wrong. The reality is, when you are making an argument and you're constantly, this is the problem with the doomers, they're constantly predicting catastrophic collapse without evidence, or spinning evidence, like misinterpreting it purposefully in many cases after being pointed out that it's flawed evidence, and you constantly reach the conclusion of doomerism that the system, for example, I'll give you a perfect example, and I've told them to his face. In 2000, sorry, I want to get the year right. 2003, Larry Lepard said the dollar had 4 years left, and people have confronted, like, why, Larry? Why? And pointed out statistics he's relying on. By the way, there are like flawed statistics throughout his book, which I did take the time to read. He misrepresents evidence about income and other things, and people have pointed this out, but he still keeps repeating these things. You are reaching a conclusion of economic doom, that we're on the verge of a big print or a big collapse without evidence. So the way to label that, it's not an ad hominem attacking the person. That is a doomerism view. That is a view that there is no way the debt problem can be overcome in a sensible way. There's no way that we can actually deal with these issues, that we're on the verge of a big reset and economic collapse. And when you have that repetitive, constant argument, it'd be no different than people calling me a statist, right? If you're calling me a statist, I don't consider that an ad hominem. I do believe there is a role of the state in the system. I don't believe that there should be total anarchy and libertarianism without any controls. I do believe there's a role of a state. So that's not an ad hominem. That's attacking the argument directly on. And I believe, with respect to doomers, their constant predictions about things without evidence warrants the label of a doomer.
But Joe, when you say, like, for example, when you make an assertion that because we think that the system is extremely fragile and debt based and about to come unglued in many ways, and then you say we don't believe in this, all the people on here who don't believe in the state. We don't say
There
that.
are people
I
on
don't
here that
believe
say
in
that.
no
I mean,
government.
old Taylor just said that he's not a statist, right? Like, what does that even mean? Like, do you not believe in the state at all? Total libertarianism, no anarchy? I mean,
I didn't use the word statist when I
you
was
literally
talking, but
posted a chart which showed me on a spectrum with statism. You did it. So I mean, don't deny it.
it's there, and I said that I'm to the right of the Declaration of Independence. There, I never used the
Okay,
word
fair enough. Fair
statist.
enough. You didn't
But
say anything.
here,
But
let
Puncher,
me.
I was
No,
going to
no, no. Let
respond.
me respond quick. Let me go
I'm on
quick.
a different spectrum.
So, is it doomerism, Joe? And I value your input, Joe. Just so you know, I'm not trying to like bash on you. Like, but is it doomerism? Like, if cancer has riddled someone's body and there's a cure that is going to obliterate the cancer and destroy the cancer and end the cancer, is it doomerism to like be predicting that cancer is going to be destroyed? Like, no, of course not. That's optimism and positivity. That's excitement and about the future. It's not doomerism. It's doom for the cancer, but who gives a fuck about doom for the
No, no,
cancer?
no. First
That's
of all,
not
your
doomerism.
analogy, the analogy falls quite short. Okay, first of all, when Bitcoin is a solution to many of these problems, right? But the issue is not one of which, like, let's dispute the solution. The issue is, what is the time frame? If you told someone, don't worry, this cancer is going to be cured by this cure, and it's 40 years away, and the person might not even live to see that, what is the point of telling them that this cure is coming? That's the problem with the doomerism argument. There are people. I was on a stage in March of 20. I want to get the year right. March of 23 with the SVB collapse, where Lawrence Lepard told me the rivets are popping, the system's going to collapse. I don't think it's going to last the rest of the year. He said that, and he said it 20 years before that in 2003. So that is the problem. When you have these arguments. Now, listen, I'll fully stipulate.
Well, Joe, he was kind of right in 2008. Something
No, it's
printing
actually, I
trillions
would
of
argue, it's
dollars and took
totally,
them over.
totally wrong, right? What happened in the greatest financial crisis in our lifetimes, 2008, right?
We printed over it.
Yeah,
We
yeah, yeah.
printed
They
over
actually,
everything, and nobody went
that's
to jail,
argument
and we just
against the
pretended. We made it worse. We made it
doomerism.
worse.
Peter Schiff was, by the way, in a space yesterday, Puncher. You'll appreciate this. I don't know if you heard his space. He admitted, he's like, I was totally wrong. I thought the system was going to collapse in 2010. I respect that. I wish.
But so did
But
Larry
Larry,
in his
Larry said
book,
the same.
Joe.
Larry has
Right,
said the
right,
same
right.
thing
But
Listening
but
to his
now
book.
now he
Larry,
says it's coming, and he said it just on TFC that it's going to be in the next 18 months, and then that's going to be the great reset. So again,
What's TFC?
sorry, the Tales from the Crypt, the
Yeah, he said
TST
Oh,
he's
oh,
going to
Tribune.
thank
be
you.
in. He said
Thank you for
Trump
the
is. He's
clarification.
go listen to the podcast. You don't have to take. I don't have to paraphrase it. I won't accredit because I don't want to start a fight with Larry. But the reality is, there are people that year after year, after
Too
year
late.
after year, after year after year, will come on these spaces and they'll tell you this is it. It's the big one. It's all going down, and that's doomerism.
Well, yeah, but he'll be right or wrong, right? I mean, he was wrong in 2008 because he didn't anticipate QE 1, 2, 3, Operation Twist, the trillions and trillions of dollars
Why
that just
not? Why didn't
literally
you
didn't fix
anticipate
the
that?
problem.
Why isn't that a flaw in your reasoning? Have you examined that? Because the people will do whatever it takes to keep the system intact.
No, I think now they'll do whatever it takes. I think the optionality that they have at this point is much less because reasons we don't need to go into. But now Larry has made another prediction. If he put a date on it, I don't do that. He'll either be right or wrong
Said the
again,
dollar is going to be dead by
and we'll see.
2030 without any evidence. Literally no evidence. Just that's it's going to happen. 2030, dollars dead.
Well, it's not like there's evidence. I mean, you're again. I always use the analogy. You're skating to where you think the puck's going to be. There's He's making assertions about things he's seeing in the system. I don't know that that's evidence, but if I look at a Jenga board and all the Jenga pieces on the bottom are pulled out and on the top they're balanced up there very precariously. It's not evidence that it's
The
going to collapse
system,
on the
can we
next
agree?
pull,
Can
but
we agree the
it's
system has
likely.
been precarious for the better part of 100 years? Can we just agree on that? It's been precarious for the better part of 100 years.
No. I think it's been increasingly precarious since 1971, and then even more precarious after things like the
That's the
2005
better
Can you
part of
guys
100
stop
2000
years.
saying
bust country, whatever.
precarious, please?
It's the Jenga
Yeah,
analogy,
yeah.
right?
So that's the better part of
It's
100 years. So 1971. Just people that think
I think
1970s is 30
Nikolai
years
was
ago.
trying to interject here
Sorry,
too. Go
sorry.
ahead. No, no, you're all good. Nikolai.
Hey guys. I I think it's a kind of an act of sophistry to cherry pick Larry Lepard's arguments and how he was wrong in '04. And by the way, I would not. I love Larry, and I think his book is an eloquently written, erudite book. I would not do what he did, where he would predict the demise of the dollar on a certain date. And I'm not necessarily predicting the demise of the dollar at all. So I think it's sort of a it's like an art of argument to distract from what we're really talking about. And spend 5 minutes on that byway is not fruitful in my opinion. There's a philosophical difference, and I believe in the individual. I believe that the state is not on your side, and there are forces in play that are very large that work against you to confiscate your productive labor over time. And so I kind of hear arguments, which I would call an apologist arguments for the status quo and the wisdom of the Federal Reserve and the wisdom of the Bank of International Settlements. And if you sort of stand athwart this, what I would call thievery over time, you're just an ignorant sod, because the technocratic state is vastly more complex than your little pea brain can fathom. And I think that denigrates valid arguments, and I think it denigrates arguments that actually are erudite and are consistent with history.
Pilot.
Hey, yeah, I hear this kind of conversation a bit where I don't see this as the demise of the dollar. I hear Saylor say it, and obviously we just had a speaker talking about it, and I'm sure a lot of people have that opinion. But to me, it seems like a lack of imagination to think that Bitcoin can't supplant most, if not all, of those things, including the dollar. As somebody who fully believes in Bitcoin, I'd love to hear somebody tell me or explain to me a world in which they both exist. And there will be a period of time, sure, where they both exist, the same way that Netflix and Blockbuster both existed, or the letter and email still exist to an extent, or any number of technologies that used to exist and maybe exist to a small extent now. You could think of a million of them, vinyl records and current digital streaming music, for example. But this idea that like the dollar's not going anywhere to me just seems either unimaginative, short-sighted, or I'm missing something. I'd love to hear somebody talk on that subject.
Yeah,
That's a little vague too, though, because we're talking a lot of, time is probably the biggest factor in that equation. So, I mean, this could be a really
Yeah,
long
I mean,
process.
$21.50,
or
the
it
dollar
just
could be gone.
or it
Yeah,
just takes
exactly.
a
So it's just kind of,
revolutionary administration who recognizes that there's an actual tool that can be leveraged now to take down the old crappy theft system.
Yeah. Well, see, this is where we disagree because when you say the old crappy system, right? These people will say this is a great system. It helps us immensely. It lets us have controls and privileges. I mean, the dollar itself, the dollar standard, is an extraordinary privilege for the United States. I don't think the American people fully grasp how beneficial it is to them to have the dollar be the global reserve asset in the treasury market being, the dollar reserve currency in the treasury market being the dollar, the global reserve asset. The reason these things exist in many ways is because the United States, after World War II, said we want to be the big gorilla. We want to control this apparatus, and we want powers and privileges so that we can enforce our will for the safety and security of the world. Now, whether that's BS or whether that's wrong or a bad view of history, it isn't like up for debate. I think that that's what the intention was. Okay, so and people will say, "Oh, you don't care about individual liberty of states." That's complete nonsense. Okay, the reality is you can have a view of the world that says, in a real politic way, I understand why they did these things. I understand why the Federal Reserve does these things, or Congress does these things, or the president does these things, without saying I agree with it. I think it's morally or ethically the correct move to do. Right? They're two separate things. You have one's like a real politic, and one's like a moral and ethical discussion, and you have to really be focused on what you're discussing. If you're discussing should the state undermine individual liberty, of course not. I don't know anybody in the room who thinks that. If you're discussing why the state would do that thing because they literally want to do whatever it takes to keep the sky from falling, that's a totally separate discussion.
I think we had
yeah.
JP and then you, Matt.
Well,
Jeremy.
I
I
just
had my
wanted
hand
to,
up, and then two
Oh,
people
okay.
talked over me. So
All
I
right,
just
Matt.
wanted to, I
I
just
just wanted
allow
to.
me to interject really quickly. The message I just heard to the millions of factories, or the tens of thousands of factories, and the millions of lives destroyed through dollar hegemony is pound sand.
I don't even follow that. I don't even know what that means. So we're describing a historical fact, and you're saying go pound sand is the message.
No,
It's like,
I'm saying, Joe, that you do not your argument doesn't take
what is
into
my
account
argument? What is
that
my argument?
dollar hegemony was great for America, and we have this wonderful benefit from it.
I never
And
said that. I
you
never said
just
that.
did. You
No,
literally just
you see,
did.
this is the problem, Nikolai. I don't think you listen very carefully.
I
The issue is this. The issue is American leadership. Okay, whether it's morally right or ethical, which I said several times, they decided that we want to be the big gorilla. That's literally. I'll quote verbatim what I said because I'm careful with my words. You don't listen. You heard Joe thinks that the dollar is good for America. That's not what I said. So please don't misrepresent the views.
okay. I stand corrected. Um, to put forth that argument in this context, forgive me for um, confusing that you don't support that argument. And what you left out of your exposition was how Dutch disease or Triffin's dilemma has really, harmed millions of Americans in gutted communities. So, I just, I'm sorry. It's like, your comment that I didn't listen to you. I guess I missed the subtlety of that.
that
Yeah,
point. But it
you missed the
seems,
subtlety.
Hey,
You
boys,
you
we're
no
gonna
no
try to
no no.
work in some
Just hey,
other.
hang on 1 second, Lauren. You missed the
yeah.
subtlety
Okay,
because
you
you
got
didn't.
37
No,
seconds
I'll give you 5. You missed the
starting
subtlety
now.
because you didn't hear when I said ethically and morally. It's a separate discussion. I literally said that in
I,
the response that I'm
yeah.
not commenting
Okay,
ethically or
Yeah,
okay,
morally.
I just can I
that's good.
respond quickly, Lauren? So
Yeah, you have
it's
27 seconds starting
I'll,
3 seconds
I can
ago.
do it in like 5.
Okay, you go.
It's not an abstraction. It's not this sort of ivory tower morality. It's it's the execution of that policy hurt a lot of people.
Okay, perfect. And just for the record, I'm a really shitty listener, so I think there's some people in my life that will concur with that. Matt Mann, and then I think we have Jeremy after that. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Bitcoin Pilot's question, because I think it's important, and this is at least the sense that I get of what Joe is kind of getting at when he's talking about people making predictions that are time sensitive, that people potentially are going to try to act upon to manage their own financial planning. And if you look back in the early 1900s, the last time we had a transition where the British pound was the global reserve currency and we transitioned to the dollar system, which I would argue was kind of finalized at Bretton Woods, right? You could argue there were cracks happening as early as the late 1800s, early 1900s in that British pound system. And then as they basically got out over their skis to fight World War One, that's when they bankrupted themselves. But really, the finalization and the transition of going from the pound to the dollar took 40 years. And there was no one single moment on, the UK, or in the UK rather, where people's lives went from great to terrible, and there was no, just flip of a switch. It was a gradual, grinding, inflationary transition period that just wrecked a lot of people's livelihoods in the UK. But I think to argue that there was a calamitous collapse in the British Empire would be wrong. And I think that's what Joe's getting at. And when people are talking about that with the current US empire, that we're going to have this calamitous collapse, it can be misleading for people, and they can honestly make financial decisions based on thinking the sky is going to fall tomorrow. And that's why I've also been try to push a little bit more positive of a message that Bitcoin is a great answer for people, and it can really allow them to take some sovereignty back over their financial position without having to believe that the sky is going to fall tomorrow. And that's also why I tried to make the point earlier of, even when these great transitions happened, unless you were in a hot war zone, your life didn't drastically change from day to day. And the people who really made out well for themselves are the ones who took individual ownership of their lives and tried to better themselves. And you're going to have to make a bunch of individual decisions every day that are going to impact you drastically more than the transition of, what the global reserve asset is. And if we move from treasuries being that to Bitcoin being that over the next 40 years, I don't see there being we wake up on Monday and the treasury is no longer the global reserve asset. I see it as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
gradual transition away from that.
Matt,
That's
you're
just,
so spot on, and not only is it not true, right? That's not how the world works. It doesn't move like that. But the bigger issue is it actually is counterproductive if you actually want to promote Bitcoin. If you tell people buy Bitcoin because the system's going to collapse, vast majority of people, because of cognitive dissonance, will say, "I can't even that's not going to happen. I don't even want to think about that, so I'm not going to buy Bitcoin." So you're hurting your cause by making these arguments.
well, and then I think
I
we
agree with
also
you on that, Joe.
start to look like people who are just out there literally on the corner saying the sky is falling, and nobody's going to give us any time of day, and they're going to think that we are actually just sky is falling doomers, for lack of a better term. And I'm not saying that that's any of us on stage. It's just, it's important that when you're not in the weeds on this stuff, that you meet people where they are, not where you are.
I don't
And
like
I
the
just try
doomer
to,
term.
I, I
It's
know, and
like
that's why I
calling
said,
it's like calling the founding fathers doomers. Like honestly, it's just
It's
Yeah,
unfortunate.
which I don't think they were, but I also don't think that they stood around ideating on only the bad things that were happening with the British Empire. They were also offering solutions for people and doing that in writing, right? If you read all the Federalist Papers, like that's them literally saying, here's the new option that we're working on, right? And the whole point here is we're not just sitting there saying, oh, the crown is so evil, right? And just doing nothing about it. That's the risk we run here. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where we get labeled as doomers if we're only talking
Yeah.
about the
Matt, can you
negatives.
do the accent one more time, please? The
Lauren really
British
like
accent.
little Lauren liked that
Yeah,
accent.
Lauren loves the accent. So
Well, for
I
that
think
note,
we're trying to cookie cutter people into like, oh, you are a doomer, blah 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 blah. Some of us are more pessimistic by nature, et cetera, and maybe we're seeing Bitcoin as a safety net, and others are seeing it on the other end of things as hope in the big thing, and it's probably a wide spectrum that we can't actually just be that cookie cutter esque of just going like, oh, you're all doomers, blah 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 blah. But yeah, no, I love this conversation and the ability for us to change our opinions. Like, for example, like the recent core dev thing. Like, I've really dove in a little more than just listening to one side, and now I've kind of listened to both sides, and I've kind of changed my own perspective. And hopefully, I'm not, you know, brain so wide open or head so wide open that my brains are falling out, but more like, hey, was I able to take all the data and be super analytical and really try to come up with the best conclusion as I see it? And I think that these type of discussions are important because they urge people that are listening and people that are responding. Oftentimes, we get into a battle where we're just trying to prove that we're right and the other person's wrong, but I really hope that we're actually trying to seek truth here. Anyway, we've been trying to wind this baby down a little bit, but it's just been so good, and there's been so many great points, and I appreciate Joe coming up and is he gone? Anyway, providing the counterpoint, because oftentimes it is just an echo chamber if we're all just having a big circle jerk. But appreciate that, Joe. Terrence, you want to maybe go through the last few hands up, and then maybe it's a good time to try to
Wait,
wrap
wait,
it.
wait, wait, wait. First,
Yeah, I
Lauren,
see.
Lauren just said circle
Yeah,
jerk.
I know. You actually lashes with a wet noodle for me at the maybe at the conference. I apologize. Kids, earmuffs. The kids listening at home, please, earmuffs. Terrence, who's next? It's
bit late
Jeremy,
for
isn't
that,
it?
don't you think?
Well, yeah, I
It
don't think we
is.
ever
My
went to
bad.
Jeremy, but Pilot's hand's been up. But I think Jeremy, you dropped yours, so why don't you jump in and then we'll go to Pilot.
Appreciate it. Lauren, I think you're a great listener, just for the record. But
Oh,
so the
thanks,
question
buddy.
came
Now
up.
there's some people in my life. Can you please come and tell them? Thanks, man. Oh man, feeling the
Yeah.
love in here today.
So yeah, wanted to touch on the question of like, when does Bitcoin overcome the dollar, and rephrase it off of the thought of, does it even overcome the dollar? Is it even competing with the dollar in its current form? Which reminds me, it takes me back to when Saylor first kind of hit the scene. At first, everything he was saying was like magic. Everybody was eating it up. I think the very first thing he said that got some people kind of craning their necks a little bit was when he said that Bitcoin doesn't compete with the dollar, and in fact, it can make it stronger. And we were all, I think, a little bit maybe confused by that. And at this point in time, here we are, like 4 years later, 3 years later, and we see the Bitcoin's price skyrocketing, and countries, our own countries, starting to talk about using it as a way to add value to the dollar. And so I wanted to bring that up. It feels like we are reaching a point where, if we want it to compete with the dollar, if we want it to be transactional in nature, then changes do need to come around to it. People need to build on top of it, and they need these changes in order to build on top of it. And so yeah, I just want to bring that question around of Joe's gone, but anybody else who might have brought it up or has a thought on it. More of a question of, can we make the dollar compete, or the Bitcoin compete with the dollar? And then the doomer spin would be, how much longer do we have left before that door is closed?
Brilliant points, brilliant takes. I love it. We don't even have to answer the question, because I think it just pose it to everybody. Because I think it's, we can speculate all we want, but Bitcoin is going to do what it does, and the collective will of people and companies and everything else is going to decide this, and we're going to just sit here and eat the popcorn and keep stacking Sats and in cold storage. So I mean, that's brilliant to me. Terrence, who is next? Because we are in the process of trying to wind this baby down.
We had Pilot.
Yeah, I whenever we have these discussions and it's a question of doomerism or do we need a collapse, and some people are more so than others, but I really, when I think of Bitcoin, the most optimistic uh, scenarios that I see in the future, to me, when I start thinking about it at a technological level and thinking of it in the paradigm of other technologies that we've adopted, that's the most optimistic future that I see. So, the idea that one needs to collapse before another can come to replace it is just doesn't bear out the way that we've seen the world transition, especially in our lifetimes, from an era that nobody used the internet to everybody using the internet. There wasn't a period where the old system that we used to use, a non-digital information system, had to collapse somehow before the new system came in to replace it. And I think that so too will go Bitcoin. And there's been so many things written about this. If you haven't read or reviewed The Sovereign Individual, I highly recommend it. If you haven't looked at Trace Mayer's 7 Functions of Money and how we transition from store of value to eventually medium of exchange, go ahead and take a look. Like, this stuff has been out for a long time. It's been talked about for a long time. And now, maybe even faster than I thought. I thought the price would be much higher. It's funny because I thought the price would be much higher and adoption would be much lower than it is right now. But we're getting the opposite. We're having these conversations about nation states, corporations, politicians, presidents talking about Bitcoin, and the price is almost lagging the information. So we're in an incredible place, and I'm incredibly optimistic. None of this doomerism for me at all.
I don't see any more hands, Lauren, but Puncher came back. He left us for a while.
You want to take us out of here?
Yeah, guys, man, it's amazing. So next Friday, we're going to take a deep dive into what currency debasement looks like and how it affects people's lives in the global south and in Africa and other countries. I've had 6 DMs from people from Romania to Argentina to Venezuela who want to be in that discussion next Friday. So real life, experiences, and I think it'll be a great space.
Will there be subtitles, or we'll be able to understand everybody?
Uh,
See.
English is a prerequisite, but my English is West Philly slang English. So if I qualify, everybody qualifies.
I know a guy who can do the subtitles.
Okay, but we don't use in like the word color.
The word water and use guys.
Terrence, I thought you were going to take us home, buddy.
Well, I was listening to the comedy gold. Sometimes you have to savor things rather than talk over them.
Oh, by the way, Terrence and I are going to create a made-for-TV gambling series. It's going to be a #1 hit, guaranteed.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. We haven't heard from you, Thomas, in a while. You wanna start the outros?
Ooh, outros. I love that word. I'm going to write that down real quick.
Yeah. So this idea of doomerism, I do consider it a bit of a cut, but I was texting Joe. I think he probably considers me having aspects of doomerism, and I guess without getting into whether it's pejorative or
Thomas
not,
the
I would say,
Doomer Boomer.
yeah, I probably resemble the remark of being a doom, but I would say, and I told this to Joe. I said, look, I consider you having normalcy bias, and by that I mean
You mean
in the
asshole.
status. Well, in the status construct, meaning that he if a doomer believes that things are going to change radically with the status quo system, someone with normalcy bias thinks that it's not, that the system is going to continue on. It might limp along like it's been limping, but it could limp along for 10 or 20 years. And I think that's where there's a lot of tension. And so, for me personally, and it's not for everybody. I know some people don't like to hear. I like to hear the debates on it because it helps me sharpen my thinking. And it is what it is. I like to hear different points of view, and I think Lauren, you said it as well. You know, echo chambers are fun sometimes, but they get boring if it's too much echo chamber and not enough division and debate. So I like to hear things. I like to consider all angles. Because I consider it and I ask questions and I don't criticize, it doesn't mean that I agree.
Yeah, no, absolutely
Nikolai,
agree with that. Love it.
did you want to go next? Nikolai,
Well,
you had your hand up, but we're just
yeah.
closing out. But
Oh, yeah. Well, first off, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to hash this stuff out. Um, just my own position regarding the dollar. Like, I would never. I think the dollar is probably one of the most strongest network effects in human history, and I do not presume to peg the moment of a transition. And I think it was Taylor or someone was talking about how these are sort of slow phase changes. Forgive me for invoking Dalio again, but Dalio says that the U.S. actually peaked, using his variables in 1900, which surprised me, and the dollar didn't take over the pound, until after World War II. So, these things, I agree with the idea that these are long, slow, gradual things. Where I think the big difference is, I do get a bit angry at the injustice I see perpetuated by the dollar system. So I would speak out against those injustices. I would try to make people aware of those injustices. And I think that's a virtue to do so. But that doesn't make me a doomer.
Jeremy, how about you?
Oh man, I wasn't ready for that.
If you're on stage, you got to be
Well,
ready. It's like roulette talking.
I was literally opening up the text message we just sent each other and responding to that.
Yeah, just don't do that next time.
My takeaway,
You're texting him?
yeah.
I feel like you're cheating on me,
Yeah,
sir. I thought we were texting. What? We had something. Oh, come on.
well, now I need to text you and
We
add a little
I thought
fold
you
of
were.
drama
I
to
thought
all
that's
this.
what I was just reading and responding to. Oh man, I am hurt. No, go on, Jeremy. Sorry, go on.
Well, you'll like this. I think the big takeaway here, we've had a lot of smart people up speaking today, covering a lot of ground. And I think everybody learned one thing important, that Lauren is a good communicator and responder. And that's the end.
This has been an amazing John, and I can't wait for the next one.
Oh, wow. Dropping the John in there. All right.
Taylor, looks like you'd like to go next.
Yeah, I got skipped yesterday, so I wanted to like raise my hand so I could go today. But I just wanted to take my little closeout time to let you guys know that so the best chicken biryani in the world is in India, and specifically in the Andhra Pradesh region. I don't remember the name of the state now because it split a few years ago, but Hyderabad, being the capital of Andhra Pradesh before, it is not currently. Hyderabad has the best biryani in Andhra Pradesh, and there's a restaurant called Paradise in Hyderabad that's widely regarded as having the best biryani, chicken dum biryani in Hyderabad. So the best chicken biryani in the world can be found at Paradise in Hyderabad, India. And if you ever have opportunity to go there on a business trip or something, that's where you should go. And
Now I know why you were skipped over yesterday.
I did have Indian food last night for dinner, though.
Matt, how about you? Let's go to you and then Joe.
As I say, the only downside to that dish is the next few days. But anyways, I just wanted to say I know that everybody has different definitions for things, and for me, the way I would differentiate between somebody who's pointing out issues and someone who is being a doomer is a doomer would be somebody, in my view, that is irrationally thinking that the end of the world is around the corner and is trying to justify that in some way, versus what I try to do is say, hey, I think there are real issues, systemic issues with our current system. And I think Bitcoin is a solution to a lot of those. And I think that over the next 5, 10 year period, if you're holding the majority of your wealth in Bitcoin, you're going to vastly outperform people that are not doing so. And I think that's a much more positive message in a way that is probably more compelling for most people. I know that probably sometimes people would disagree with me on that take, but that's just kind of what I've been thinking about a lot the past few days because I feel like we've been kind of as a group having this conversation about, who's a doomer, who's not a doomer, what even is it in the first place. So I just wanted to kind of give that thought of how I view it after these multiple conversations over the past few days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's sort of been a good theme for today's space is positivity. Going talking about, do we refer to Bitcoin as digital gold? I personally prefer to call it digital property. It might be a nuance, but I think in general, I don't know people that own gold, and a lot of people that have stacked gold and own gold. I think that's great, but it does sometimes come from a more prepper mentality versus like real estate or owning an asset, which does tend to have a more optimistic feel. And I agree with a lot of the things that Joe and Matt said today. And I just feel like people will respond better to optimism and positivity and a bright future, even though we know we're being debased and inflated upon. And we know all these things are happening, but, um, I don't think we feel them to the degree that some people are surmising or forecasting. Joe, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. So I actually really agree and appreciate Thomas's framing. Um, the reason why I point out doomerism is because I think it's a cognitive bias. And that is not to say that I don't have cognitive biases. I do, numerous ones, probably because of my position in life and what I see and everything. But it's important when you come to a discussion to acknowledge your bias, right? So I'll fully say that I am my bias for a variety of different reasons, both I think just from where I'm at in life and where what I study is to more of the same. And there are people that I tend to run into who constantly have more of a, the sky is falling type mentality. And I call that doomerism. I think it's a bias. So if we can come at a conversation like Thomas and I, where he can say, I have this bias and this is why, and I can say the same, I have this bias and this is why. Part of having an informed discussion involves just acknowledging that. And that's not meant as a pejorative or an attack. It's no different than if a liberal and conservative sit down and they want to have a healthy conversation. It's important, I think, that they just acknowledge, like, yeah, I have a liberal bias, I have a conservative bias, I have a apolitical bias, whatever it is. If you acknowledge that at the get-go and say, someone like Joe has this bias, and then you can start to talk about it and maybe understand why you have that bias. And if you understand that it's like what is a quote from Matthew, right? First, before you remove the speck in your neighbor's eye, remove the plank from your own. I think that's like a huge problem in not only the TradFi space but in the Bitcoin space, and we saw that yesterday. I mean, you have to get O'Hare to acknowledge his bias, just like you have to get some people in these rooms to acknowledge the massive bias you have by holding a ton of Bitcoin and hearing all the macro podcasts where everybody tells you that fiat's about to collapse. I mean, because I think it is a bias, and maybe there's some truth to it, right? Maybe the system is really fragile, as Puncher points out. It's only getting more fragile and more precarious, is the word he used. To me, like that is really essential to just acknowledge where you come from as a starting point in terms of your outlook on the world, and then saying, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my bias is clouding my judgment. Maybe the Silicon Valley Bank isn't going to lead to $1 million Bitcoin in 60 days, like Balaji said, or whatever it was. Because I think that is how you make good, informed assessments and decisions about the world.
Yeah, it's like Lauren. I've been telling him he needs to start acknowledging his bias that he thinks his words are more valuable than ours. So he
This is
talks
true.
over us.
This
Oh,
is
see, there
true.
he
I'm
goes.
working on that. The Lord is working with me on the virtue of patience.
Or just take your
Terrence,
medication.
well, that too. I have a lot going on here. But I do appreciate Joe in this space. Honestly, man, he adds so much value. If it weren't for Joe, oftentimes it would just be a bunch of us patting each other on the back and quite boring. when you have somebody that comes in and challenges what you think are your convictions, but you're rattled, it's like working out. Like it makes you stronger, it makes your convictions stronger. Somebody who's coming in and saying, "Well, what is the definition of this word?" Think about it. Use your brain. It actually stimulates your mind. It opens it. It
Are
actually
you looking in the mirror
expands.
talking to yourself right
How
now?
did you know that?
Oh, I don't know.
You have a
Yeah.
camera in my house, buddy? Am I bugged? This is scary.
You're
No,
good you're good enough, Lauren. People
yeah,
like
you're
you.
good enough, and people like you. No, no, I really like. I don't agree with everything Joe says, but honestly, like he is so good for a conversation. If you have the ability to like remove the whole like, oh, this guy's challenging me, and it creates this wall, this barrier, and then you actually it does the opposite effect of actually being a really positive thing where you can actually learn and grow and be a better person. It actually makes you, hate people personally for whatever reason. It's not cool. So it's like I hate to see that, but I love to see Joe back in here uh as a counterpoint to a lot of things. So appreciate
Well,
you, Joe.
well, plus Joe's wearing a tie. Like we need people in the
That's true.
space that
That's
have
true.
ties and not like Matt. I mean, Matt has that bow tie that probably twirls and
Hmm.
squirts water. We need like professionals in here.
Yeah, well, I was beginning to wonder because Matt said the word transition about 35 times, so I was starting to scratch my head there for a minute.
Look, I have that so that nobody confuses me as a serious person. I don't want anybody to
Mhm.
think that, I'm up here calling myself an expert in anything. I am just a barely above like 80 IQ person, which is why I have a bow tie.
That's well said. I mean, we want to hold people in esteem that we listen to frequently, but we're all the same. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. We all get angry. And I think just extending kindness and courtesy, forgiveness, all go a long way. And it makes us better people when we're able to do those things as well. So probably just my final word is just to be kind to one another.
That was beautiful. And little known Bitcoin Today trivia, Lauren hosts Sans The Restriction of Clothes. There's a mental image for you, but he wears no tie, he wears no clothes.
He likes to talk to little
Especially
Lauren.
pants, especially the pants. Yes.
What's on deck for Monday, Lauren? Anything special other than the news?
I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I actually have quality time with my wife on Mondays. I haven't done a Monday in a couple months, I
Terrence, he
think.
didn't even
Oh, that's
plan
Monday,
right.
this space
Monday
out. Do
starts
you think
fast.
he planned as far ahead as Monday?
I really don't make plans ever. So, I mean, for spaces, usually there's no agenda unless we have a guest, which oftentimes that actually hasn't worked out well because there's been some crazy breaking news we really needed to talk about. And then we're like, well, we scheduled this guest a week ago. So I guess we're going to do the guest. So it's kind
Plans,
of been,
plans are overrated, as is doing
that's
stuff.
true.
Doing stuff,
Yeah.
to quote the Tao of Steve and Michael Saylor, doing stuff is overrated. Hitler did a lot of stuff, and we all wish he hadn't.
That's true. That's why I only have two plans in Vegas, and the rest is just flying by the seat of our pants. So it should be a lot of fun.
Drink and eat.
Oh, shoot. Four plans. Thank you, Terrence. I almost forgot to. I'm on the Ozempic diet, so yeah.
All right, men and lady, have a
That
great
was you,
weekend.
Lauren.
Goodbye. Have a nice weekend, everybody.